Chapter 1487. Brotherly, this Ao Zhenheng is worthy of being called the Shattered Heaven Palace's #1 sword Dao monstrous genius His reputation as Scar of the Heavens is well deserved. When this child grows up, your Shattered Heaven Palace will have another peerless master. In the distance, a mid-level saint said to another mid-level saint, "Haha, young Palace Master Ao is indeed the pride of our Shattered Heaven Palace." The mid-level saint surnamedly laughed. The genius small world contained many geniuses. The outer disciples had different identities in the outside world. For example, this Li man's identity in the outside world was an elder of Shattered Heaven Palace. At this time, watching Ao Zhenheng repeatedly kill, he had no intention of stopping him. Even if Chu Mu was really killed by Ao Zhenheng, although the upper echelons of the genius small world would be angry, they would not become enemies with Shattered Heaven Palace. A dead genius was not a genius. The sword in Ao Zhenheng's hand slashed out one after another from different angles. Each slash was extremely fast, as if riding the wind. 18 styles of flying heavens. This was one of Shattered Heaven Palace's powerful close combat sword techniques. Ao Zhenheng had mastered 3 of its essence. 18 slashes in a flash, 18 slashes in a flash, each slash was fatal. If it were other people, they would definitely die under Ao Zhenheng's sword, but Chu Mu would not. 18 slashes were completely blocked by Chu Mu before he counterattacked. Ao Zhenheng displayed another sword technique, the 7 styles of shattering heaven. Its power was even more tyrannical than the 18 styles of flying heavens. Chu Mu also displayed a sword technique to resist. In the blink of an eye, Ao Zhenheng displayed more than a dozen sword techniques. Some were Shattered Heaven Palace's inheritance sword techniques, some were sword techniques he obtained from his adventures in the outside world. No matter which one it was, they were all very powerful. Moreover, Ao Zhenheng had grasped the essence of each sword technique. Different sword techniques, each one was very tyrannical. Ao Zhenheng had completely grasped the essence of each sword technique, mesmerizing everyone watching. However, it was completely useless against Chu Mu. Chu Mu did not display many sword techniques, only a few, but with these few sword techniques, he was able to resist Ao Zhenheng's different sword techniques and counterattack. From this point of view, Chu Mu was more brilliant. A battle between sword cultivators was extremely dangerous, especially in close combat. Every sword strike could take a life, and one could be killed if they were not careful. The intense battle between Chu Mu and Ao Zhenheng made everyone exclaim in delight, but at the same time, they all felt their scalps go numb. They felt as if they were in the middle of the battle and were being sliced by sword chi, causing pain all over their bodies. After using a dozen different sword techniques, none of them could do anything to Chu Mu. Ao Zhenheng's heart was gloomy, and his killing intent was even stronger. Such a person definitely couldn't be allowed to live, or else he would be a threat to himself. Moreover, the opponent could feel his killing intent. Since they were already enemies, he couldn't hold back. Ao Zhenheng's cultivation was 1 greater celestial layer and 3 lesser celestial layers higher than Chu Mu. His cultivation technique could also be considered divine grade. The power of his sword chi was not much weaker than Chu Mu's. His sword techniques were powerful, and his sword intent was shocking. He could be considered an extremely strong opponent. Ao Zhenheng continuously displayed more than a dozen sword techniques, but they were all blocked by Chu Mu. At the same time, Chu Mu secretly memorized them. When he had time, he would comprehend and analyze them to increase his accumulation of sword technique. Ao Zhenheng's killing intent grew stronger, and Chu Mu could feel it even more clearly. He increased his strength and forced Ao Zhenheng back with a sword strike. The sword light condensed and silently stabbed out with incomparable speed. Ao Zhenheng only felt his hair stand on end, and his expression changed greatly. He hurriedly retreated and brandished his sword light. The chaotic sword light condensed in front of him, and it was impenetrable. A slight sound rang out beside his ear, but it made Ao Zhenheng panic. He only felt a trace of coldness sweep past his ear, taking away a few strands of his hair. Just a little bit more and he would have been hit. According to the speed and sharpness of that sword, if he had been hit, he would have died on the spot. Ao Zhenheng immediately understood. He had a killing intent towards his opponent, and his opponent probably wanted to kill him as well. Heaven-breaking sword secret, sword chi returned to origin. Ao Zhenheng did not hesitate. He stretched out his left hand and his fingers formed a sword. He quickly tapped his chest 7 times, and each tap landed on a different spot. When the 7th strike landed, a terrifying power erupted from Ao Zhenheng's body. That power turned into a suction force, and as rumbling sounds echoed in the air, it absorbed the Yuan Qi from the world in an extremely domineering manner, as if it was plundering it, and refined it into sword origin. Usually, when cultivators cultivated, the method of absorbing heaven and earth origin energy was to swallow and spit it out. Absorbing a part of it would naturally give back a part of it, forming a virtuous cycle that would not cause the heaven and earth origin energy to dry up. But the secret technique Ao Zhenheng was using right now was an extremely tyrannical secret technique recorded in the Heaven-Breaking Sword Manual of the Heaven-Breaking Sword Palace. It plundered heaven and earth origin energy, and in an instant, it strengthened his sword chi and increased his strength. In just a short 3 breaths of time, an endless amount of heaven and earth origin energy was swallowed. Ao Zhenheng's body seemed to have turned into a black hole, swallowing everything. The terrifying sword chi scattered all around him was also torn apart. This guy's sword chi unity secret technique has also been cultivated to the 2nd layer. Manzhan's eyes shone brightly, and he was somewhat excited. The Heaven-Breaking Sword Manual's sword chi unity secret technique had a total of 3 layers. Shattering Heaven Palace, Heaven Suppressing Sect, Heaven Splitting Hall, and Heaven Combining Sect all had 3 layers. The 2nd layer could increase one's strength by 10 times, and the 3rd layer could increase one's strength by 100 times. The 1st layer was easy to cultivate, and the 2nd layer could be cultivated with some time and treasures. However, the 3rd layer was very difficult to cultivate. At least for now, it was an extravagant hope. However, the 2nd layer could increase one's strength by 10 times. With their current strength, another 10 times would be extremely terrifying. Immediately, Manzhan and the other 2 stared at Chu Mu. From the battle just now, Chu Mu's strength should be slightly higher than Ao Zhenheng's, but he was unable to suppress Ao Zhenheng. If he didn't have any tricks up his sleeve, facing Ao Zhenheng who used sword chi unity secret technique would be very dangerous. A thought flashed through their minds. From the battle with Manzhan until now, even when he attacked in anger, Chu Mu didn't lose his mind. The strength he displayed was only slightly higher than Ao Zhenheng. Ao Zhenheng, who didn't use any secret technique, was probably between an ordinary 1-star saint and 2-star saint. It wouldn't be difficult for Chu Mu to kill him. However, there were many people watching, and he didn't want to expose his full strength. The strength and talent he revealed now was enough to make him the center of attention. After accumulating, his reputation would reach an extremely high level. It was necessary to preserve a little bit of his strength. A monstrous genius who could fight and kill a 1-star saint and a monstrous genius who could kill a 2-star saint were 2 different levels. Of course, if someone investigated, they would know that Chu Mu came from the Kanglan Empire and so on. They would also know what happened back then. When they heard that Chu Mu killed a 2-star saint, they wouldn't be so direct. Because they didn't see it with their own eyes, they would have doubts. They would think that Chu Mu used a secret technique, or that the Kanglan Empire's saint experts weren't strong enough and couldn't be compared to the ancient heaven domain's saint experts. Since he wanted to preserve his strength and kill Ao Zhenheng, Chu Mu only had one method, and that was to use a secret technique. With a thought, the secret technique was used. Divine Wilderness Unity Secret Technique. The Divine Wilderness Unity Secret Technique was a secret technique that came with the Divine Wilderness Sword art. If successfully used, it could increase one's strength by 10 times, just like Sword Chi Unity secret technique. Chu Mu stood in the void. A circle of yellowish-brown ripples spread out from his feet. In the blink of an eye, it covered tens of thousands of meters of the void. Wherever the ripples passed, strands of energy were stripped away and turned into reverse ripples. They rapidly contracted and entered Chu Mu's feet. The two ripples that went in opposite directions gave people a dazzling feeling. What kind of secret technique is this? It gives off an ancient feeling. This kid must have some ancient inheritance on him. Sword Chi Unity's secret technique tyrannically plundered the Yuan Chi of heaven and earth, turning into a black hole vortex that swallowed everything. On the other hand, Divine Wilderness Unity's secret technique didn't seem that tyrannical, nor was it that shocking. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the two ripples of Divine Wilderness Unity's secret technique weren't affected by Sword Chi Unity's secret technique at all. The two sides were only a few hundred meters apart. Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness Unity secret technique naturally swept past where Ao Zhenheng was. Sword Chi Unity's secret technique wasn't affected, nor was Divine Wilderness Unity's secret technique. However, the Yuan Chi of heaven and earth was being fought over by the two secret techniques. The Yuan Chi of heaven and earth was forcibly divided into two halves. One half was absorbed by Sword Chi Unity's secret technique, increasing Ao Zhenheng's strength. The other half was absorbed by Chu Mu, causing Chu Mu's aura to constantly rise. The previous showdown of sword techniques had turned into a showdown of secret technique. Sword Chi Unity's secret technique of the Heaven Sundering Sword Manual. Divine Wilderness secret technique of the Divine Wilderness secret technique. More than half of the sound bamboo forest below had been destroyed due to the battle between the two. The remaining half, under the plundering of the Yuan Chi of heaven and earth by these two mystic arts, rapidly lost its green color and became dry and yellow. Wrinkles and cracks appeared on it, and then it became brittle and grayish-white. Cracks appeared on it, like a spider web densely covering it. This was a sign that it had lost its vitality. The two secret techniques were too tyrannical. As they clashed, their tyrannical index rose sharply, devouring the vitality of all things. This scene immediately caused the faces of the spectators in the distance to change greatly. They hurriedly retreated even further. Manzhan, Xiaozi, and Ji Tsai had already retreated tens of thousands of meters away. This was because when the ripples of the Divine Wilderness secret technique swept past them, they felt their strength becoming restless, as if it was showing signs of going out of control. With their strength, they could naturally resist, but now they were only watching others fight. There was no need to consume their strength to resist the aftermath of the secret technique. The mighty momentum spread hundreds of thousands of meters away. The terrifying Yuan Chi of heaven and earth overflowed, and there seemed to be a shadow in the sky. The fluctuations became more and more intense. After reaching the peak, they suddenly turned and quickly calmed down. This meant that whether it was Ao Zhenheng's Sword Chi Unity secret technique or Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness secret technique, they had both been successfully used. Under the Sword Chi Unity secret technique, Ao Zhenheng's body was surrounded by a white air current. It was extremely fierce and astonishing. Chu Mu's body didn't have any strange phenomenon, but his aura had soared. Chapter 1488. With the Sword Chi Unity secret technique, Ao Zhenheng's aura had surpassed the Nirvana realm and reached the Eternal realm. Chu Mu's aura was between the Nirvana realm and Eternal realm, not as strong as Ao Zhenheng, but no one dared to underestimate him. No one thought that Chu Mu's strength was inferior to Ao Zhenheng's. The previous battle had already explained everything. You also have such a secret technique. Ao Zhenheng's face was gloomy. He thought that with his own strength, he could kill the other party, but unexpectedly, the other party's strength was unexpectedly strong, even stronger than him. In desperation, he could only use the Sword Chi Unity secret technique to increase his strength, by 10 times in order to kill the other party. Unexpectedly, the other party had also mastered a secret technique. It was not surprising that the other party had mastered a secret technique, but unexpectedly, the other party's secret technique was not inferior to his own, 10 times stronger. The advantage was gone. Putting aside his temperament, Ao Zhenheng could be said to be the most outstanding sword cultivator Chu Mu had ever met. Even sword maniac Ling Fengshao could not compare with him in terms of talent in the sword Dao. He himself had unparalleled talent in the sword Dao, was a monstrous sword cultivator, and came from the Shattered Heaven Palace, one of the 4 heavenly gates. His background was unimaginable. Chu Mu and Ao Zhenheng were different. Ao Zhenheng was very arrogant, and his arrogance originated from his unparalleled talent in the sword Dao. He despised those who were inferior to him, and envied those who surpassed him, harboring killing intent. For example, Chu Mu's talent in the sword Dao was not inferior to his, and even surpassed his. He wanted to kill Chu Mu, and the two had only met for the first time. Chu Mu was different. He wouldn't look down on people whose strength and talent were inferior to his, nor would he be envious of people whose strength and talent surpassed his. From beginning to end, Chu Mu had only walked on the path of the sword. He only had a desire to constantly challenge, to go higher and stronger. No matter how strong you are, there will be a day when I surpass you. This was Chu Mu's belief. He would not be jealous of the other party's victory over him, nor would he be filled with killing intent. However, he would not be merciful to those who wanted to kill him. There were 2 reasons why he hadn't killed Ao Zhenheng so quickly. Firstly, he didn't want to expose his full strength. Secondly, he wanted to suppress Ao Zhenheng and force him to use more technique. The more techniques Ao Zhenheng used, the greater Chu Mu's gains would be. The more he accumulated, the more helpful it would be for his future path of the sword. To put it bluntly, Ao Zhenheng treated Chu Mu as a threat that had to be eliminated. On the contrary, Chu Mu only treated Ao Zhenheng as a trial, a sharpening stone, a testing stone, a stepping stone, and nothing more. If Ao Zhenheng knew about this, he would probably vomit blood from anger. Think about it. You regard a person as very important, whether good or bad, very important, but the other party doesn't take you seriously. How does that feel? Don't think that I can't do anything to you. Ao Zhenheng continued as a ruthless glint flashed in his eyes. Shortly after, the returning origin sword chi around him sped up and fluctuated. Ao Zhenheng's hands also moved rapidly, forming hand seals one after another. Under the fluctuation of Yuan Qi, Ao Zhenheng's figure swayed rapidly and became blurry. Could it be that he has mastered that move? Ji Tsai's face suddenly changed. This guy actually mastered that move silently. If it wasn't for Chu Mu, I wouldn't have known. Man Zhan said in a low voice, the battle intent in his eyes soaring to the sky. According to their words, the move that Ao Zhenheng had mastered was obviously very powerful. I think that he originally planned to hide it first and use it as a trump card when the Eternal Sacred City appears. Xiaozi said indifferently, however, looking at the current situation, he should have just mastered it. He must use the Sword Qi Restoration secret art to use this move. Otherwise, he won't have enough strength. One had to admit that Xiaozi's eyes were very sharp. Sword Qi Doppelganger. With a low shout, Ao Zhenheng, who was swaying at a high frequency, made a swoosh sound, as if he was split into 2 by a sword. The 2 identical Ao Zhenheng's aura was equally powerful, with streams of qi revolving around them. That was the power of the Sword Qi Restoration secret art. Compared to the original Ao Zhenheng, the aura of the 2 Ao Zhenhengs was not the slightest bit weaker. This secret art was indeed amazing. Sword Qi Doppelganger. It was also the first time that Chu Mu had seen such a secret art. It was very novel. The 2 Ao Zhenheng's expressions were equally cold. They each held a sword, one on the left and one on the right. A terrifying killing intent was released, locking onto Chu Mu. Chu Mu felt that these two Ao Zhenhangs were real. One Ao Zhenhang was very strong, but two Ao Zhenhangs were even stronger. That kind of power was not as simple as 1+1. Kill! With a shout, the two Ao Zhenhangs attacked Chu Mu. Chu Mu discovered that the speed and trajectory of the two Ao Zhenhangs' attacks were the same. In other words, the two Ao Zhenhangs were using the same sword art, but one was attacking from the left and the other from the right. Chu Mu retreated. With a wave of his hand, the sword light split into countless numbers, slashing towards the two Ao Zhenhangs. 1 against 2. Chu Mu was surrounded by the two Ao Zhenhangs. They attacked from the left and right, front and back, up and down. The two Ao Zhenhangs cooperated very well, without any openings. After a few exchanges, Chu Mu immediately understood that Ao Zhenhang's sword Qi doppelganger was actually controlled by only one person, causing the sword art they used to be exactly the same. In this way they lacked flexibility. However, the two of them were controlled by the same mind, so their coordination was even better. The power was also very terrifying. The sky-beheading sword slashed out, repelling the Ao Zhenhang on the right. With a wave of his left hand, the imperishable sword appeared in his hand. The sword light streaked across the sky, attacking the Ao Zhenhangs on the left and right. With two swords in hand, it gave people a fright. Dual sword style. He actually knows how to use two swords. Manjan was shocked, but soon became even more excited. This guy really didn't use his full strength when fighting me. Xiaoze was also surprised. Ji Tsai's eyes were full of splendor as she laughed softly. I can't help but want to make a move on him. Xiaoze and Manjan pretended not to hear, but they both knew that if Ji Tsai was really interested in Chu Mu, then Chu Mu would have a headache. With two swords in hand, Chu Mu easily blocked Ao Zhenhang's joint attack and counterattacked, forcing Ao Zhenhangs to continuously exert their strength. Ao Zhenhang's face became even more unsightly. Chu Mu had once again exceeded his expectations. These two people, one was the real Ao Zhenhang, and the other was the sword Qi doppelganger. Ao Zhenhang's expression changed, allowing Chu Mu to distinguish the real from the fake in an instant. The one on the right was the real Ao Zhenhang, while the one on the left was the sword Qi doppelganger. Although their expressions were the same, the sword Qi doppelganger's expression was somewhat stiff. If not for his observation power, it would have been hard to notice. Blocking, the two swords consecutively struck out. Under the eruption of power, the sword Qi doppelganger was repelled. Chu Mu rushed toward Ao Zhenhang's real body. The two swords danced, and the sky-beheading sword pierced out in an instant. The sound of wind and thunder surged, and the momentum was shocking. One side of the sky was about to be pierced through by the sword. Sky strike sword style. Under the terrifying impact of the sword style, Ao Zhenhang's face changed greatly. He immediately displayed a tyrannical sword art, forming a watertight defense. The imperishable sword struck out, silent and extremely fast. Silent sword style. The imperishable sword light pierced through Ao Zhenhang's watertight defense, piercing towards his forehead. In an instant, Ao Zhenhang only felt his forehead swelling, and a piercing pain. Waves of cold numbness spread out from his brain. In a hurry, Ao Zhenhang's sword was placed horizontally in front of his forehead, blocking the silent sword style. A terrifying power erupted, and Ao Zhenhang's sword almost flew out of his hand. His entire body retreated in the void, and the web between his thumb and forefinger was torn. At the same time, the sword Qi doppelganger's sword slashed out. The heaven and earth trembled, and the sword light was vast and mighty, as if it could shatter the heavens. Die! With a roar, Ao Zhenhang spun around, and the sky-beheading sword pierced out. A speck of starlight condensed at the tip of the sword, and a terrifying pressure was contained within. The space under the sword was frozen solid. In an instant, the crowd seemed to see the phantom of a star appear, emitting a terrifying pressure that made people feel even more stifled. The two swords collided, and the star phantom shattered in an instant, and a terrifying power erupted. With an earth-shaking rumble, Ao Zhenheng's sword Qi doppelganger was repelled, flying several thousand meters away. Under the terrifying power, the sword Qi doppelganger's left arm and right leg were blown away. If it was a normal person, they would have been seriously injured. But the sword Qi doppelganger was not a human, and it did not bleed. Even so, losing an arm and a leg still affected its balance. The returning origin sword Qi twining around its body accelerated, and the world's yuan Qi was constantly absorbed. The sword Qi doppelganger's broken arm and leg reformed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chu Mu's two swords shook, and like a great ping soaring through the sky, he appeared in front of Ao Zhenheng in the blink of an eye. The two swords crossed, and the sword light seemed to be branded in the void, difficult to erase. Ao Zhenheng felt a deadly murderous intent, and that kind of coldness caused goosebumps to rise all over his body. But in any case, he was still a monstrous sword cultivator of Shattered Heaven Palace, the last disciple of the Palace Master. In a situation where Chu Mu did not erupt with his full strength, he would not be killed so easily. With a thought, Ao Zhenheng immediately activated his protective artifact. The intersecting cross-shaped sword light shone with silver light and was incomparably sharp. It directly slashed onto Ao Zhenheng's body. In an instant, Ao Zhenheng's body flashed with a layer of fine light. The light flashed by and blocked Chu Mu's cross-shaped sword light. Under the powerful impact, his entire body was pushed back. Readjusting himself, Ao Zhenheng's figure flickered, and dozens of afterimages appeared one after another, making it difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. At the same time, the sword Qi doppelganger also recovered and rushed towards Chu Mu. Compared to the real Ao Zhenheng, the sword Qi doppelganger had a special characteristic, and that was that it was not afraid of being injured. It could fight to its heart's content, and even if it was killed, it would not affect the real Ao Zhenheng. Turning around, the two swords struck out, repelling the sword Qi doppelganger. Chu Mu once again slashed out, and a terrifying sword light raged, destroying dozens of afterimages. Chapter 1489. Under the dual swords, Chu Mu completely suppressed Ao Zhenheng. Even if Ao Zhenheng used his sword Qi doppelganger, he couldn't do anything to Chu Mu. Instead, he was repeatedly pushed back, injured, and suppressed by Chu Mu. The dual swords were like rolling thunder, powerful and shocking. Once again, they pushed back the sword Qi doppelganger. This time, the sword Qi doppelganger's arm shattered, turning into yuan Qi and dissipating. Chu Mu took the opportunity to pursue. In an instant, the heaven-beheading sword slashed out 13 times. The 13 styles of Philion, each strike was fatal. 13 wounds immediately appeared on the sword Qi doppelganger's body. Each wound would cause a portion of the sword Qi doppelganger's yuan Qi to dissipate. Before he could replenish his energy, the imperishable sword slashed out. Like a crescent moon, it pierced through the void, cutting through all obstacles. Crescent Moon Slash. This was a sword technique recorded on the mid-grade sword steel in the Forest of 10,000 sword steel. With one slash, the sword Qi doppelganger that was about to recover was split into two. As a result, the sword Qi doppelganger's yuan Qi doppelganger had dissipated and couldn't be replenished in time. Without holding back, Chu Mu completely suppressed the sword aura doppelganger. His two swords crossed, and he used different sword technique. The power was astonishing, and the sword aura doppelganger that was split into two halves was cut into pieces. With a bang, the sword Qi doppelganger exploded under Chu Mu's fierce attack. Yuan Qi rushed out like a storm. Ao Zhenheng's face was as gloomy as the dark clouds in the sky. In the blink of an eye, his sword Qi doppelganger was destroyed by the opponent. Although it could be reformed, it needed time. After destroying the sword Qi doppelganger, Chu Mu turned around and threw out a sharp sword light towards Ao Zhenheng. Without the sword Qi doppelganger's restraint, Ao Zhenheng paled in comparison to Chu Mu's dual swords. Blocking and dodging, Ao Zhenheng's heart was almost dripping blood. The defensive artifact on his body was like a tortoise's shell, allowing Chu Mu to attack it without breaking through. Ao Zhenheng's face was not so thick. Under the gazes of so many people, he was unable to resist and could only rely on his artifact to protect himself. This kind of humiliation was deeply ingrained in his heart. The two swords continued to attack. The speed of the swords seemed to be getting faster and faster. Every sword hit the same spot. Chu Mu swore to break the defense. Dripping water could penetrate a stone. No matter how hard a defense was, it would eventually be broken. Ao Zhenheng's counterattack seemed extremely weak. Swinging his two swords, Chu Mu got into a fighting stance and thrust out his sword. The sword was like a stream of light, piercing through the clouds and breaking the moon. It carried an unparalleled sharpness as it streaked across the sky. A light sound rang out, and Ao Zhenheng's expression changed. A small hole had appeared in his invisible barrier. When the second sword arrived, the small hole expanded and the cracks spread. In the distance, the people of Shattered Heaven Palace frowned. Shwa shwa shwa. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen swords struck the same spot. Ao Zhenheng was completely exposed to Chu Mu's sword. Silent sword style. The sword light was a line, silent and incomparably fast. Before Ao Zhenheng could react, the sword had already approached the space between his eyebrows. Stop! The Shattered Heaven Palace's saint-level powerhouse in the distance finally reacted. His complexion changed, and his face turned pale. With a loud roar, he drew his sword. The sword light condensed into a crescent moon, tearing through the sky. With an indescribable speed, it attacked Chu Mu. But no matter how fast it was still 10,000 meters away. Distant water could not put out a nearby fire. The condensed sword light silently pierced Ao Zhenheng's forehead. Not good. Xiaoze and the other two's complexions also changed. Whether Ao Zhenheng lived or died, they did not care. Although this person was one of the ancient heavenly domain's 4 great young monstrous geniuses like them, they were not on good terms with him. However, if Chu Mu killed Ao Zhenheng, there would be severe consequences because Ao Zhenheng was the last disciple of Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master. He was a genius that Shattered Heaven Palace had spent countless resources to nurture and had high hopes placed on him. If Ao Zhenheng died, the entire Shattered Heaven Palace would be enraged. The genius small world would not be spared. A great war was inevitable. At that time, the ancient heavenly domain might be plunged into chaos. They understood this point, but it was already too late to stop it. Each of their complexions turned pale, thinking that they should immediately send the news back to their sects and make preparations as soon as possible to deal with the upcoming chaos. Unable to dodge, Ao Zhenheng's complexion turned ashen, his eyes filled with fear. The space between his eyebrows was pierced by the heaven-beheading sword. In an instant, the sword would pierce his forehead, penetrate his brain, and mince his soul. A sudden change occurred. A terrifying aura was released from Ao Zhenheng's body in an instant, covering the sky and freezing the void. That aura was vast and boundless, like the universe, overbearing and aloof. It had a kind of terrifying feeling that it could easily pierce the vault of heaven and shatter the void. Tens of thousands of meters of space was completely frozen under that terrifying aura. Everyone in the range shuddered, their souls trembling. An indescribable pressure descended, making them feel as if they were ants. The gap was too great. The Shattered Heaven Palace's mid-level Saint Realm powerhouse's crescent moon sword light was also frozen in the void, unable to move. Chu Mu's sword fell between Ao Zhenheng's eyebrows, unable to advance any further. That terrifying aura spread out from Ao Zhenheng's body, covering tens of thousands of meters of heaven and earth. Chu Mu bore the brunt, the main target. His soul felt like it was about to shatter, and his body also felt like it was about to shatter. Bursts of pain emerged from the innermost part of his body. His heart felt like it was about to burst. Bursts of pain, his blood vessels almost shattered, and his bones issued creaking sounds. Chu Mu only felt that his body was about to shatter, about to be crushed into meat paste. Terrifying, it was really too terrifying. This was an outcome that no one had expected. Originally, Chu Mu's sword should have killed Ao Zhenheng, but now it was blocked. Ao Zhenheng still had other trump cards, and it was very likely that they were left behind by the Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master. That's right, this was indeed a trump card left behind by the Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master. It was a kind of protection. After all, he was the Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master's last disciple. He was heavily nurtured and had high hopes placed on him. How could the Shattered Heaven Palace master not have perfect protection measures? Ao Zhenheng's body contained the will of the Shattered Heaven Palace master. One had to know that the Shattered Heaven Palace master was a peerless powerhouse that surpassed the 9-star Saint realm. His will was so terrifying that even if Chu Mu's strength was 10,000 times stronger, he still wouldn't be his opponent. Everyone present added together wasn't a match for the Shattered Heaven Palace master's will. Ha 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 ha, you're dead. Ao Zhenheng howled with laughter. He originally thought that he was dead for sure, but he didn't expect that such an unforeseen event would occur. It seemed that although his master didn't give him any special trump cards, he had done something to his body that could save him at a critical moment and even turn defeat into victory. Xiaoze and the others also understood, and their complexions became ugly. Because now, the one who was going to die was Chu Mu. Chu Mu, this person, although they had only just come into contact with him, they felt that he was very good and could be friends with him. They didn't expect that before they could deepen their relationship, this person would become history. Although they felt that it was a pity, the three of them didn't have the slightest idea. Because under that terrifying will, they couldn't move at all, and even their thoughts became slow. They felt that within their bodies, there was probably some sort of protection left behind by their masters, such as a will. However, it was not under their control, and would only erupt on its own at the critical moment of life and death, just like Ao Zhenheng. Ao Zhenheng howled with laughter, his eyes revealing an ominous glint, and his killing intent blazed. However, there was no need for him to do anything. The will left behind by his master was enough to crush the opponent's soul. He wanted to personally see this bastard being destroyed under his will. Just by imagining the process, he knew that it would be more painful and torturous than killing the opponent with a single sword strike. Only by doing so could he vent the hatred in his heart. The will attacked Chu Mu's soul, and the sword images in his mind trembled. Sword light flickered, and under the impact of the will, they almost collapsed. The broken heavenly Tao sword in the middle also trembled. At this moment, an indescribable pressure, like the heavenly Tao, spread out from the heavenly Tao sword, resisting the impact of the Shattered Heaven Palace master's will. It spread out, and all the sword images seemed to be supported by this force, and all of them stabilized. That force, which was also a will, spread out from Chu Mu's body. In an instant, the shackles of the Shattered Heaven Palace master's will were disintegrated, and the void within a radius of several tens of thousands of meters returned to normal. That will gave people a kind of lofty feeling, as if the heavenly Tao was overlooking the common people. It was fair, just, and merciless. Under this pressure, everyone felt as small as an ant. Heavenly sword. Chu Mu's mind recovered completely, and he was very surprised. Heavenly sword, heavenly Tao sword. Chu Mu felt very familiar with this will, because he had personally experienced it before. It was the heavenly sword Saint Venerable's will. Perhaps when he was in the Heavenly Sword Island, the heavenly sword Saint Venerable had left a will in his body, and used that will to protect him secretly. This was indeed the case, but this will was different from other wills. It wouldn't appear when Chu Mu was in a life or death crisis. It would only be activated when Chu Mu was facing a power that far surpassed his own. For example, the Shattered Heaven Palace Master's will had tried to destroy Chu Mu's soul, and that was how it had been activated. The Shattered Heaven Palace Master was a peerless powerhouse that surpassed the 9-star Saint level, while the Heavenly Sword Saint Venerable was a Saint Emperor level powerhouse, one level higher than the Shattered Heaven Palace Master. Under the confrontation of wills, the Shattered Heaven Palace Master's will was directly defeated. Since he wanted to kill Chu Mu, the Heavenly Sword Saint Venerable's will wouldn't be merciful, and rushed forward. Vaguely, it seemed as if a heavenly sword flashed, killing Ao Zhenheng, and sank into his forehead. Ao Zhenheng seemed to hear a blood-curdling scream, and immediately, his body was out of control, turning into a stream of light that rushed into the distance. The void in front of him was directly torn apart by an invisible force, and Ao Zhenheng's body directly plunged into it and disappeared. The Shattered Heaven Palace Masters will exhausted the last of his strength to bring Ao Zhenheng out of the small world of geniuses. Chapter 1490. You have two choices. First, this palace will send experts to kill him at all cost. Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master coldly said to Ao Zhenheng, who was standing in front of him with a gloomy expression and a trace of frustration in his eyes. Second, you personally behead him. I choose the second choice. Ao Zhenheng gnashed his teeth. Chu Mu had left a shadow in his heart. If it developed further, it would evolve into a heart demon. If he chose the first choice, Shattered Heaven Palace would send experts to kill Chu Mu. Even if Chu Mu's methods were heavenly, it would be difficult for him to escape death. In this way, Ao Zhenheng's fear would disappear, but the shadow would still be there. At some point, it would become an obstacle to his progress. The second choice was to kill Chu Mu with his own hand. It was very difficult, but if he succeeded, the shadow would disappear and his essence, qi, and soul would reach a new height. It would be of great help to his cultivation in the future. Ao Zhenheng was a true monstrous sword genius. Although his character was bad, he still had his merit. Therefore, he gave up the first choice and wanted to kill Chu Mu with his own hand. Very good, from now on you must increase your cultivation speed. Try to increase your strength as much as possible before the eternal sacred city descends. When the time comes, break through to the eternal ancient sacred city, and break through to the eternal ancient sacred city. That person will also enter the city, and you can kill him, Shattered Heaven Palace's palace master said coldly, his voice flat. Yes. Ao Zhenheng clenched his teeth and said. In order to take revenge, he had to kill that person with his own hands in front of everyone's eyes. He had to cultivate as if his life depended on it. Within the small world of geniuses, the bamboo sound tower was shattered, and the sound bamboo forest was destroyed. It either shattered or withered, and the entire sound bamboo forest disappeared from this world. There were countless cracks on the ground that intersected with each other, emitting astonishing sword qi fluctuations. In the sky above the sound bamboo forest, the remnant sword intent sat there, suppressing eternity. Many people looked at this scene, and the shock in their hearts surged like a tidal wave, unable to calm down for a long time. This was a life-and-death battle between monstrous geniuses. Endless sword techniques were used, exquisite battle techniques were used, and powerful secret techniques were used. Finally, at the critical moment of life and death, a sudden change occurred. Ao Zhenheng's body erupted with the will of the Shattered Heaven Palace Master, suppressing the void and attempting to destroy Chu Mu's soul. However, another change occurred. Chu Mu's body also had the will of a master, one that was even stronger than the will of the Shattered Heaven Palace Master. It defeated the will of the Shattered Heaven Palace Master, forcing him to risk the destruction of his will to take Ao Zhenheng and escape from the small world of geniuses. Every single one of them was so captivating, causing their hearts to soar high and unable to calm down. They were incomparably excited and even felt suffocated. Kongming Mountain was Chu Mu's new abode. This was not his choice, but a new abode arranged for him by the upper echelons of the small world of geniuses. It was one of the top abodes in the small world of geniuses, and only high-level saint-level powerhouses could enjoy it. In the past, it was hard for Chu Mu to enjoy such treatment. However, after defeating Ao Zhenheng, he had the qualifications. Moreover, the willpower on Chu Mu's body was a willpower that only a saint emperor could possess. This caused them to attach great importance to him. Chu Mu also liked the environment of Kongming Mountain very much, and it was even better than the Sound Bamboo Forest. The mountain was 3,000 zhang high, and at the foot of the mountain was a bamboo forest. This Sound Bamboo Forest was several times larger than the original Sound Bamboo Forest. When the wind blew, the ethereal sound of bamboo would resound throughout the world, entering the mountain, making people feel relaxed and refreshed. On the mountain, lush vegetation grew, and strange stones were everywhere. The scenery was unique and elegant. The yuan-qi of heaven and earth was very rich, far more than the Sound Bamboo Forest. Kongming Mountain was rich in a kind of ore called Kongming Stone. Kongming Stone was a special kind of ore. It was relatively brittle, and there were many holes inside. When the wind blew, it would emit a whimpering sound, which was very strange. Kongming Stone could be used as a material to arrange formations, and it could also be used to refine some special treasures, etc. All in all, Kongming Stone had considerable value, and now, in a sense, it was Chu Mu's private property. Such a abode was more than 10 times better than the Sound Bamboo House. Chu Mu settled down in Kongming Mountain with peace of mind. "Brother Chu, we'll take our leave." Outside Kongming Mountain, Xiaozi cupped his hands towards Chu Mu and smiled. "We'll part this time, but we'll meet again in the future. I hope that when Eternal Sacred City descends, we'll see Brother Chu again." "Ancient Sacred City, I'll wait for you to fight again," Man Zhan said. "We can really have a child." Before Jitsai left, she teased Chu Mu again. After watching the three leave, Chu Mu entered the abode, opened the seal, and prepared to go into seclusion for a period of time. The battle with Man Zhan was not a battle of life and death, so the gains were limited. But the battle with Ao Zhenheng was really a battle of life and death, and the gains were great. Ao Zhenheng's talent in the sword Dao was amazing, and he was also accepted as the last disciple of Shattered Heaven Palace, one of the 4 heavenly gates. He was personally taught by Shattered Heaven Palace, and a large amount of precious resources were used to cultivate him. With the combination of talent and resources, his strength had become very tyrannical and shocking. For a long time, among his peers, Ao Zhenheng could not find anyone who could compete with him in the sword Dao. Chu Mu was the first, and also the first person to surpass him in the sword Dao. This aroused jealousy in his heart, and aroused his killing intent, which caused the battle to evolve into a battle of life and death, becoming very intense. Ao Zhenheng was indeed worthy of being a publicly acknowledged monstrous genius of the Tao of the sword. He had executed over 20 completely different sword techniques, and every single one of them possessed terrifying might. Every single one of them had deeply grasped the essence of the Tao of the sword and brought out its might to the fullest. Even so, he could not do anything to Chu Mu, and was suppressed by Chu Mu instead. In the end, he had no choice but to use Sword Qi Return to Origin and Sword Qi Doppelganger. Under Chu Mu's 2 swords, Ao Zhenheng was beaten black and blue. In the end, if it were not for Shattered Heaven Palace's Palace Master's will, he would have died. During the fight, Chu Mu reflected on it one by one, especially the dozen powerful and profound sword techniques that Ao Zhenheng used. Analyzing, comprehending, and then mastering them, adding bricks and tiles to his accumulation. In Empty Cry Cave, Chu Mu held a sword in one hand, thought for a moment, and then slashed out with a mysterious angle. Although Shattered Heaven Palace was one of the 4 heavenly gates of Ancient Heaven Domain, it could not cover the sky with one hand. Therefore, what happened in the small world of geniuses could not be sealed. After all, there were many people who witnessed it. Although Shattered Heaven Palace was powerful, it could not seal all the news. Soon, many people in the ancient Heaven domain knew that Shattered Heaven Palace's young monstrous sword cultivator, Ao Zhenheng, who had the title of Scar of Heaven, was defeated by a foreign genius from the small world of geniuses, and he was defeated in the Sword Dao. The entire ancient Heaven domain was boiling with excitement. Previously, when the small world of geniuses publicized Chu Mu, it could not be compared to this time. Ao Zhenheng was recognized as a monstrous sword cultivator in the ancient Heaven domain. Shattered Heaven Palace's strength was deeply rooted in people's hearts, and it had already formed a fixed concept. When the news of Chu Mu defeating Ao Zhenheng came out, it had a greater effect than the small world of geniuses. Suddenly, the name Chu Mu was known to everyone. Chuzhen, stop for me. Chuzhen, did you hear me? Stop for me. On the street, a young girl was chasing a young man in front of her, chasing and shouting. Remember, from now on, I am not called Chuzhen, I will change my name to Chu Mu. The young man stopped, turned around and said in a proud tone. In a small city in the ancient Heaven domain, a small family surnamed Chu, the family head's son had just been born. Haha, my son will be named Mu, his full name is Chu Mu. The family head of this small family looked at his newly born son and said happily, Now I am called Chu Mu, do you remember? In the ancient Heaven domain, there were also some large cities, such as Heaven Mountain City. Heaven Mountain City was huge and ancient. Among the many cities in the ancient Heaven domain, it could be ranked in the top 10. There were 8 major forces in Heaven Mountain City, and the Chu family was one of them, ranked 3rd. At this time, in the Chu family's meeting hall, the family head and the elders were all present. This time, the elders are gathered here to discuss Chu Mu. The family head of the Chu family sat at the head of the table and said, Family head, Chu Mu's surname is Chu. He must be related to our Chu family. An elder said, That's right. Our Chu family is considered a quasi-first-rate faction in ancient Heaven region. In the outer regions, we are definitely a first-rate faction. Chu Mu probably has our Chu family's bloodline, or else he wouldn't be so outstanding. Another elder added, In this elder's opinion, Chu Mu is most likely the descendant of one of our Chu family's elders who was left outside. The third elder said slowly, Family head, I think we should send someone to the small genius world to bring Chu Mu back to the Chu family to acknowledge his ancestors. Agreed. Agreed. The other elders nodded their heads in agreement. That's what I was thinking. The family head of the Chu family nodded and glanced around. Which elder is willing to bring our Chu family's monstrous genius back to acknowledge his ancestors? Leave this matter to me. The second elder immediately stood up. In terms of eloquence, I'm the best. The third elder also quickly stood up. Chu Mu is wandering outside. He definitely doesn't have much of a sense of belonging to our Chu family. It won't be easy for him to acknowledge his ancestors, but I'm confident that I can bring him back. The fifth elder also rushed to say. The elders were all scrambling to be the first to speak. Monstrous genius, their Chu family was considered a second-rate force in the ancient Heaven domain, second only to the quasi-first-rate forces. They didn't have a single peerless genius. If they had a monstrous genius, they would definitely rise up and become a first-rate force. In the future, they would be able to dominate the first-rate forces. Therefore, whoever could bring Chu Mu back to the Chu family would have a great merit. These elders all seemed to have fallen into a delusion, believing that Chu Mu was the Chu family's bloodline that had wandered outside. Chapter 1491. Chu Mu wields dual swords and possesses unparalleled fighting strength. I think it's most likely him, Yang Zhantian said with certainty. The deep blue world is huge, and we were hunted down when we entered. I don't know how many of us survived. I met you guys first, but I never expected to hear news about that guy. Lien Hongyun was a little excited. I thought I had a fortuitous encounter and my cultivation had greatly increased. I thought I would definitely defeat him the next time we meet. Now it seems unlikely. The three of them were Gu Luankong, Yang Zhantian and Lian Hongyun. When they entered the Deep Blue World, they were hunted down by the experts of the Deep Blue World. They were separated and only managed to escape after a narrow escape. However, they had basically used up all their trump cards. Fortunately, they were geniuses on the Heavenly Youth ranking and had the protection of the Heavenly Youth ranking. Unlike the others, not only did they manage to escape, they also had a fortuitous encounter that increased their strength and cultivation. As for those who didn't have the protection of the Heavenly Youth ranking, most of them died under the pursuit of the Saint rank experts of the Deep Blue World. A portion of them were also hunted down and exchanged for rewards. Now, there weren't many humans from the ancient God world that survived in the Deep Blue World. As for the other races, some of them were wiped out. Those who survived suffered great losses, even the powerful underworld God clan. The Deep Blue World was dominated by humans after all. The humans from the ancient God world and the Deep Blue World weren't much different. It was hard to tell them apart. However, the other races were different. They were too conspicuous and would be easily suspected. We have a Deep Blue God Pearl now. If this Chumu is really that Chumu, he might have a Deep Blue God Pearl too. Lian Hongyun said. Let's find him. Gu Luankong smiled. Chumu was proficient in dual swords and possessed level 8 sword power. He had unparalleled talent in the sword Dao and was at the Nirvana realm 8th sky. He was the sect master of the true sword sect of the Kanglan Empire. Soon, Chumu's background was dug out. He didn't need to announce it himself. The true sword sect became famous in the ancient heaven region because of this. All kinds of information about the true sword sect was also dug out. Although their overall strength was not strong enough, they were suspected to be the remnants of the true God sword sect, a large sword sect that had been destroyed many years ago. In the true sword sect, there was a 7-star sword saint elder, a 6-star sword saint elder, and so on. The 10 esoteric disciples, the core disciples, the elite disciples, and the inner disciples were all recorded in a book. The ancestor of the true sword sect was one of the 5 saint exalts of the Blue Sea human race, the celestial sword saint. Everyone knew about this as well, immediately dispelling many people and organizations that harbored ill intentions towards the true sword sect. To make a move against the true sword sect, one had to consider whether or not they would offend a holy venerate. Even the 4 heavenly gates would not be willing to do so without sufficient benefit. In any case, just as Chumu expected, the true sword sect became famous, thoroughly famous. Although Chumu didn't spread the news personally, the result was the same. Perhaps even Chumu himself didn't expect so much. The famous true sword sect was not only in the ancient heaven domain, but also in other domains. Like a storm, it swept across and almost reached many domains in the Deep Blue World, letting people know that there was a sword Dao sect that wasn't very powerful, but had astonishing potential. Many people who wanted to cultivate the Tao of the sword but had no way to do so were like cats that saw a fat mouse. They were wild with joy and headed towards the true sword sect of the Azure Water dynasty. They planned to become a disciple of the true sword sect and learn the Tao of the sword. Chumu, who was in seclusion, declined all visitors and focused on cultivating in his cave dwelling. According to Xiaozi, the ancient sacred city would descend in the next few years. The ancient sacred city was an opportunity, an extremely good opportunity. As long as one could survive after entering, they would most likely be able to obtain an opportunity to advance to the Eternal Realm. Even Eternal Realm saint experts would be able to obtain benefits after entering the ancient sacred city. Therefore, the descent of the ancient sacred city in a few years would definitely attract countless geniuses and experts. The competition would become very fierce. Before that, Chumu needed to become stronger. After a period of seclusion to digest what he had learned from the life and death battle with Ao Zhenheng, Chu Mu came out of seclusion and went to the 4th floor of the Enlightenment Pagoda to comprehend more. Comprehension of sword skills, sword cultivation, and so on. There wasn't enough time, so Chu Mu could only make a choice. He temporarily gave up on cultivating the power of heaven and earth, and used all his time on sword cultivation. He didn't know why, but ever since he comprehended the true meaning of sword stabbing, he had a strange feeling. It was as if the power of heaven and earth wasn't so compatible with sword cultivation. Chu Mu didn't know what sword cultivation was like in ancient times. Even if he was considered a genius in sword cultivation and had shocking attainments in sword cultivation, he was very clear that he was still walking on the path, still fumbling and advancing bit by bit. Comprehension in the Enlightenment Pagoda, cultivation in the Little Aeon Pagoda. The Little Aeon Pagoda was said to be built with reference to the Aeon Pagoda. It had a small portion of the Aeon Pagoda's power, the power of time. The Little Aeon Pagoda had a total of 3 floors. On the 1st floor, there was double the power of time passing. On the 2nd floor, there was double the power of time passing. On the 3rd floor, there was double the power of time passing. In other words, on the 1st floor of the Little Aeon Pagoda, 1 day outside was equivalent to 2 days inside. On the 2nd floor, 1 day outside was equivalent to 4 days inside. On the 3rd floor, 1 day outside was equivalent to 8 days inside. The Little Aeon Pagoda was built based on the Aeon Pagoda. In terms of power, there was a difference. Hence, when one entered the Little Aeon Pagoda, one's mind would be under greater pressure than the outside world. The pressure on the 1st floor was the lowest, the 2nd was stronger, and the 3rd was the strongest. Nirvana realm cultivators could withstand the 1st floor, the 2nd floor was difficult, and only eternal realm cultivators could withstand the 3rd floor. Chu Mu entered the 3rd floor. 1 day was equivalent to 8 days. He spent 3 days on the 3rd floor of the Little Aeon Pagoda, which was equivalent to 24 days. Chu Mu's cultivation had improved again. After leaving the Little Aeon Pagoda and flying towards Kongming Mountain, Chu Mu thought about it. When he arrived at Kongming Mountain, he frowned slightly. There were 2 people standing outside Kongming Cave, an old man and a young man. The moment Chu Mu arrived, the 2 people's eyes instantly lit up. The young man's expression was even more excited. Chu Mu, I didn't expect you to be a disciple of the Chu clan. I'm Chu Xiuza, the young master of the Chu clan. The young man walked over with large strides. His tone carried some excitement as he spoke, causing Chu Mu to feel stunned. What Chu clan? Chu Mu glanced at the young man and looked at the old man. The young man was only in the Nirvana realm, while the old man was in the Eternal realm. He was a 6-star saint. You must be Chu Mu. You're indeed a talent. No wonder you have the bloodline of the Chu clan. The old man smiled and nodded. He looked at Chu Mu as if he was a junior, which made Chu Mu frown. Tell me why you're here, Chu Mu said indifferently. Don't be in a hurry. I know you must have a lot of questions in your heart. Let me explain it to you now, the 6-star saint said with a smile. However, it's not good to stand here and talk. Please. Chu Mu opened the cave dwelling seal and walked in. The old man and the young man followed. The young man was very curious about the cave dwelling. He looked here and there, and his face was filled with amazement. Speak, Chu Mu said after sitting down. The old man frowned. He felt that Chu Mu was being too disrespectful to his elders. But then he thought about it. Chu Mu was a monstrous genius, and he didn't know his background. It was normal for him to have such an attitude. He calmed down and began to explain. As he listened, Chu Mu was stunned. In the heavenly mountain city of the ancient heavens domain, the Chu family was ranked 3rd among the 8 major forces. It was a quasi-first-rate force in the ancient heavens domain. There were high-level Saint Realm experts in the Chu family, as well as many mid-level Saint Realm experts. Among them, some would go out to gain experience, some would return, and some would disappear without a trace. This old man was the current fourth elder of the Chu family. According to their analysis, 100 years ago, a genius of the Chu family went out to train. He left the ancient heaven region and went to the outer regions. There was no news of him since. Chu Mu was very likely the descendant he left behind. The Chu family's conjecture and analysis, when spoken by the fourth elder, seemed to have a certain persuasiveness. It was as if this was true. If Chu Mu's mind wasn't clear and he didn't know where he came from, he would have believed it to be true. After hearing that, Chu Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hadn't thought that his fame would bring him such trouble. Yes, from Chu Mu's point of view, this was a kind of trouble. This time, my purpose is to bring you back to the clan to acknowledge your ancestors, said the fourth elder. I think you're mistaken. My surname is Chu, but I'm not a member of the Chu clan, said Chu Mu neither quickly nor slowly. He wasn't angry because he felt that there was no need to be angry. The fourth elder had just mistaken him for someone else. Perhaps he also had the intention to recruit him for the clan. Whether you're a member of the Chu clan or not, there's actually no conclusion. However, as long as you follow me back to the clan and verify your bloodline, we'll know whether it's true or not, said the fourth elder. Yes, Big Brother Chu, we'll know once we verify your bloodline, said Chu Xiaozhe. My surname is Chu, but I'm very clear about my background. I have nothing to do with your Chu clan, said Chu Mu. In the entire ancient heaven region, or even the entire deep blue continent, there are people with the surname Chu. I'm not the only one. I still insist on verifying your bloodline. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we verify it, said the fourth elder stubbornly. Chu Mu frowned again. This was a bit unreasonable. He was very clear about his background. He came from the ancient god world and wasn't someone from the deep blue world. How could he be related to the Chu clan of this world? I'll say it again. I have nothing to do with your Chu clan. Chu Mu stood up. All right, there's no need to say any more. I'm going into seclusion. The fourth elder of the Chu clan and the young master of the Chu clan were expelled. Chapter 1492. After I uploaded the first chapter yesterday at 6 o'clock, my wife asked me to help her bathe the baby. After bathing, the baby's grandparents said that they missed him after not seeing each other for a few days, so we video chatted for a while. After that, Six Paths went to cook. Only after I finished my meal did I realize that I forgot to update the chapter. Normally, Six Paths would update the first chapter at around 6 o'clock in the evening. Since the beginning of the novel until now, I have never stopped updating the chapter no matter if I am sick or if my family is sick. Fourth Elder, is Chu Mu really a disciple of our Chu family? Chu Xiaozi asked after leaving the Kongming mountain. Chu Mu's attitude was very firm, which made his thoughts waver. According to our elder's analysis, most likely. The fourth elder said after pondering for a while. Then what should we do now? Chu Xiaozi asked. He naturally hoped that Chu Mu was a disciple of their Chu family. That way, the Chu family would have a monstrous genius, and then the Chu family would be able to develop and become stronger. It's very simple. Spread the news and let everyone know that Chu Mu has our Chu family's bloodline and is a disciple of our Chu family. Fourth Elder said, if he still refuses to admit it, come to our Chu family to verify the bloodline. Fourth Elder, isn't that a bad idea? Chu Xiaozhe hesitated for a moment before speaking. This method was equivalent to making a decision without the other party's consent. It was quite a bit of coercion. A monstrous genius was proud. How could he be willing to be coerced? If something went wrong and he offended the other party instead, wouldn't the losses outweigh the gains? Chu Xiaozi's concern was very reasonable. Offending a monstrous genius was not something fun. Don't worry, he is a disciple of our Chu family. He might be a bit emotional at the beginning, but it will be fine in the end, the fourth elder said. Since that was the case, Chu Xiaozi didn't say anything more, but he still felt uneasy. The news spread quickly. What? Chu Mu is a disciple of the Sky Mountain City's Chu family? Chu Mu is the patriarch of the true sword sect of the Kanglan dynasty. What does he have to do with the Sky Mountain City's Chu family? You don't know about this. Back then, a genius of the Chu clan went out to train and left behind a bloodline outside. All kinds of discussions spread throughout the ancient heavenly domain. Chu Mu is a disciple of the Heavenly Mountain City's Chu clan? Lien Hongyun and the others were dumbfounded when they heard this. They looked at each other in dismay and then smiled. The Sky Mountain City's Chu clan really knows how to flatter themselves, Yang Zhantian said. Indeed, Chu Mu was a monstrous genius with boundless potential. Even if he couldn't become a heavenly emperor in the future, he would at least surpass the 9-star saint realm. A peerless genius who surpassed the 9-star saint level could establish a first-rate force. As for the Chu clan of Heaven Mountain City, it was only a quasi-first-rate force. Chu Mu was still unaware of this news because he had already closed the Hollow Chime Cave and started a new round of seclusion. Chu Mu had a feeling that he would gain something from this seclusion. However, he had no way of knowing what it was. He would only know after he obtained it. Inside the Hollow Chime Cave, Chu Mu held a sword and practiced sword art. It had already been more than a month since his battle with Ao Zhenheng. Chu Mu's gains were great. Suddenly, his sword paused slightly, and his eyes became cold and sharp. The aura on his body was sharp, but also contained a trace of lightness. Swish, swish, swish. In an instant, 18 rays of sword light were astonishingly sharp and lightning fast. They slashed out from different angles, attacking the front and trying to kill. If Ao Zhenheng saw this scene, his eyes would immediately pop out. He was so shocked that his eyeballs would fall out. Because the sword art Chu Mu was using now was a sword art that belonged to the Shattering Heaven Palace, Flying Heaven 18 swords. For a normal sword cultivator, it would take at least a year for them to familiarize themselves with the 18 flying sword. It would take them 3 years to master the 18 flying swords. It would take them at least 10 years to comprehend its essence and grasp its essence. Ao Zhenheng was known as a monstrous sword cultivator. From practicing to mastering the essence of the 18 flying heaven swords, it took him half a year's time. This kind of speed was very fast. In the Broken Heaven Palace, since ancient times, he could be ranked in the top 3. Now, Chu Mu had only used a little more than a month to master the Flying Heaven 18 sword. Moreover, he had grasped its essence and derived his own unique insight. The most important thing was that Chu Mu did not obtain the secret manual of the Flying Heaven 18 sword. He had only fought with Ao Zhenheng, experienced Ao Zhenheng's moves, and then mastered them. If the Shattering Heaven Palace master knew this, perhaps he would not have given Ao Zhenheng any choice. Instead, he would have directly killed Chu Mu to prevent future troubles. Chu Mu continued to practice the sword art. Ao Zhenheng had used more than a dozen sword arts in the battle, and they were all performed under Chu Mu's sword. The power of these sword arts was not weak. Most of them barely had the power of a low-level sword art in the forest of 10,000 sword steel. A few of them could even be compared to a middle-level sword art. Chu Mu would not use these sword arts in battle. The difference between their power and the 3 major sword arts was too great. The reason why he practiced and mastered them was to broaden his horizons and increase his accumulation of sword arts. More than a dozen sword arts were nothing. However, Chu Mu was very interested in the secret techniques that Ao Zhenheng had mastered, especially the Sword Qi Doppelganger secret technique. Sword Qi Doppelganger, a Sword Qi Doppelganger with the same strength as the main body. Under the control of the main body, the strength of the doppelganger would increase several times. Especially for someone like Chu Mu, who was proficient in dual swords, it would become even more terrifying. There should be more to the Sword Qi Doppelganger secret technique. Chu Mu stopped practicing and thought to himself. With his current horizons, he could see some of the mysteries of the Sword Qi Doppelganger secret technique. He could also deduce that there were deeper changes to the Sword Chi Doppelganger's secret technique. After thinking for a while, Chu Mu had some ideas. The Sword Chi Doppelganger has no consciousness. If this secret technique is developed to a high level, it might be able to create a doppelganger with its own consciousness, Chu Mu thought to himself. He exhaled, and some fear flashed in his eyes. He did not know if his speculation was correct. If it was true, then the secret technique after the Sword Chi Doppelganger's secret technique should be very terrifying. The Sword Chi Doppelganger did not have any consciousness and was controlled by the main body. Therefore, it could cooperate with the main body very well. This was a good thing, but it still lacked flexibility and autonomy. If the Sword Chi Doppelganger had its own consciousness, it would become an independent entity. It would be even more flexible and powerful. If I can get the Sword Chi Doppelganger's secret technique, my strength will increase by a lot, Chu Mu thought to himself. Unfortunately, he could not get it. Dispelling this thought, Chu Mu started practicing swordsmanship again. Swordsmanship had to be combined with footwork in order to maximize its power. Otherwise, there would be a limit to pure swordsmanship. This limit would prevent the full power of the swordsmanship from being unleashed. Chu Mu had amazing attainments in swordsmanship, but he did not pay enough attention to footwork and body movement. If he could make a breakthrough in footwork and body movement, his strength would increase significantly. Cultivation, continuous cultivation, one sword technique after another was performed under Chu Mu's sword. Ao Zhenheng's dozens of sword techniques, as well as the sword techniques that he had comprehended in the forest of 10,000 sword steels, were performed to his heart's content. He was very familiar with each and every one of them. There was no strongest, only stronger. While practicing, Chu Mu got rid of all distracting thoughts. In his mind, there were only sword techniques and sword move. Unknowingly, his body and footwork were compatible with the sword techniques and sword move. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed in his cave residence. While practicing, Chu Mu suddenly paused. His body and movements froze, and his eyes shone with a bright light. It was a kind of light that belonged to wisdom. It was a kind of light that came from suddenly comprehending something and understanding something. It was a sudden realization that came naturally. It was a great realization that had been accumulated over time. Although I can't do the Sword Chi Doppelganger, I can do this. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Mu took a step forward. Suddenly, a figure was left on the spot, while the real body appeared in another place. The figure that was left on the spot was lifelike. It stayed there for 3 breaths of time before fading, and 5 breaths of time before disappearing. With another step, another figure was left on the spot. Chu Mu continued to take steps, leaving behind figures that seemed endless, filling the cave residence. Each figure was left for a few breaths of time. They were so lifelike that it was impossible to tell if they were real or fake with the naked eye. It was as if there were countless Chu Mus appearing in the cave residence at the same time. After a pause, the figures disappeared one by one. Chu Mu stood in the cave residence with joy in his eyes. Integrating sword chi into my footwork and body movement to leave behind afterimages to confuse the enemy. It will definitely have a miraculous effect in battle. Chu Mu muttered to himself, in that case, this move will be called Sword Chi Doppelganger. Sword Chi Doppelganger is an afterimage left behind by integrating Sword Chi into a body movement and body movement. It is not considered a body movement or a body movement, but it is equivalent to a unique combination of body movement and body movement. As he spoke, Chu Mu took another step forward. Another afterimage appeared on the spot, and another one appeared a few feet away. It was exactly the same. The real body stared at the Sword Chi Doppelganger. It faded after 3 breaths of time, and disappeared after 5 breaths of time. The appearance is exactly the same, and it is impossible to tell with the naked eye. However, the aura is much weaker, and it is not agile enough. With a single glance, Chu Mu saw the flaw in it. The sword Qi doppelganger was only in the initial stage, and the flaws were very obvious. It still needed further improvement. After understanding the flaws, Chu Mu had a clearer target for improvement. After thinking for a moment, he took another step forward. A figure stopped at the same spot. This time, it faded after 3 breaths of time, and disappeared after 5 breaths of time. However, Chu Mu carefully observed the changes in the aura. Compared to before, the aura was stronger and more agile. It was closer to the real body. The sword Qi doppelganger was an unexpected yet expected gain. The sword Qi doppelganger should have the same aura as the real body, and the same agility. This way, it would be even more difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake, and it would be even more effective in confusing the enemy. As for the time it could stay, 3 breaths of time was actually enough. In a battle between experts, 1 breath of time was enough to determine victory and defeat, life and death. 3 breaths of time was very long. However, if he could extend the time it could stay, it would be extremely good. Chapter 1493. Time passed silently. No matter how powerful you were, you couldn't make him stay. In the blink of an eye, it had been over a year since Chu Mu had come to the ancient heaven region. A few months ago, ever since Chu Mu had learned of the news from the heavenly mountain city's Chu family, he couldn't help but feel speechless. He also felt that the Chu family's methods were shameless and even angry. He found the upper echelons of the genius minor world and asked them to announce that other than the same surname, he had no connection with the heavenly mountain city's Chu family. Although the genius minor world's status in the ancient heaven region wasn't as high as the 4 heavenly gates, it was still better than some first-rate powers. In terms of genius certification, it was even better than the 4 heavenly gate. The announcement issued by the genius minor world was very credible. Originally, under the discussion of countless people, the news that was almost believed to be true once again caused a heated discussion. Chu Mu had personally said that he had used the genius minor world as a guarantee. Other than the same surname, he had no connection with the heavenly mountain city's Chu family. When this news came out, the entire ancient heaven region was shaken once more. Compared to the news from the Chu family, most people believed the news from the genius minor world more. As a result, the heavenly mountain city's Chu family became a family that was condemned by many people. After a while, the heavenly mountain city's Chu family's reputation was ruined beyond repair. The Chu family had no choice but to send several elders to the genius minor world to see Chu Mu. However, they were all rejected by Chu Mu. Contradictions were immediately aroused. The Chu family also issued an announcement that they firmly believed that Chu Mu was a descendant of the Chu family. If they didn't believe it, as long as Chu Mu went to the Chu family and tested his bloodline, they would know whether it was true or not. When the Chu family's announcement came out, the direction of the situation changed once more. A portion of people were skeptical. If Chu Mu really wasn't a descendant of the Chu family, then he could go to the Chu family to test his bloodline. However, Chu Mu didn't give any response. This discussion continued for nearly a month before it died down. The result was that the Chu clan had become famous, and Chu Mu had become famous once again. Chu Mu, after telling the higher-ups of the Genius Small World to use the name of the Genius Small World to send out a notice, he didn't pay attention to it anymore. He didn't want to argue with the Chu family. The reason was very simple. If it was just a misunderstanding, they would understand very quickly. However, if it wasn't a misunderstanding, but rather a deliberate attempt to confuse the public and cause others to think that Chu Mu was their family's disciple, they definitely wouldn't give up just because of Chu Mu's notice. In Chu Mu's eyes, verbal arguments were the most powerless. Only the sword in his hand could understand. However, although the Chu clan of Heaven Mountain City was only a quasi-first-rate power, it was still not a powerful existence that the current Chu Mu could contend against. Since he couldn't contend against them, he would shut his mouth for now. He wouldn't make any meaningless arguments. He would wait for the day when he was strong enough to argue with them. Otherwise, it would just be a waste of time. After making the announcement, Chu Mu went into seclusion for a period of time. His cultivation base had also successfully broken through to the peak of the 8th heavenly layer. He had also perfected the half-sword move into a complete move, the cloud-piercing sword move. He had also perfected the sword chi shadow, which was a movement and footwork technique. A shadow could stay for 5 breaths of time. Its movements, appearance, and even aura were the same as the real body. Unless the person's soul power was stronger than Chu Mu's, it would be impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. They would be confused. With the improvement of his cultivation base, sword art, and the completion of the sword chi shadow, Chu Mu's strength had improved significantly. The cultivation environment of the genius small world was good, but for Chu Mu, he had reached a bottleneck. If he continued to cultivate in seclusion, there wouldn't be much progress. Therefore, he began to accept missions in the genius small world and completed them one by one. He received the rewards and merit points of the genius small world. In a short period of time, Chu Mu had completed dozens of missions and received a lot of merit points. Now, Chu Mu had accepted a new mission. This mission, in Chu Mu's opinion, was not too difficult, if there were no accidents. Eliminate the White Dragon Gate. The White Dragon Gate was a sect in the ancient heaven domain. It had been established for less than 100 years. Its leader, Lu Bailong, was suspected to be at the 2nd heavenly layer of the ancient heaven. There were 4 elders in the sect, all of whom were at the 1st or 2nd heavenly layer of the ancient heaven realm. There were also hundreds of disciples in the Nirvana realm. Although it was called a sect, it was more like a gang. The leader of the White Dragon Gate was an evil man. He had the power to kill and rob people within 100 miles. He was also very fond of beauties. Almost all the ordinary people, and those who were weaker than him within 100 miles, had been persecuted by him and the White Dragon Gate. Eradicating the White Dragon Gate became a mission in the genius small world. Chu Mu didn't care about how it became a mission. What he cared about was the rewards after completing the mission. The generous rewards mainly depended on merit points. His current status in the genius small world was at the gold level. However, his merit points couldn't be compared to those at the bronze level. Even those at the black iron level had more merit points than him. Merit points could be exchanged for treasures in the genius small world. As long as the treasures were in the genius small world, one could exchange for them with sufficient merit points. Chu Mu had already checked. There were many treasures in the Million Treasure Palace in the genius small world. Among them, there was the essence of the power of heaven and earth, such as the wind soul essence and the 1,000-year-old thunder crystal. These were all treasures that Chu Mu needed to cultivate the 2nd level of the Sword God's Descent secret technique. The merit points required to exchange for them were simply astronomical. However, with Chu Mu's gold level status, he could obtain them at a price of 70%. If his merit points reached the dark gold level, and his status rose to the dark gold level, the 70% would be reduced to 60%. Under normal circumstances, only saint-level experts would dare to accept this mission. Even Xiao Yuanji, Ying Daokong, and the others wouldn't dare to accept this mission unless they were in a group. However, Chu Mu dared to and accepted it. Chu Mu's acceptance of this mission wasn't a secret, and it attracted the attention of many people. The White Dragon Gate was located in the White Dragon Town in the northeast corner of the ancient heaven domain. This town wasn't originally called White Dragon Town. Since Lu Bailong came and established the White Dragon Gate, it was forcefully renamed to White Dragon Town. The White Dragon Gate was the overlord of White Dragon Town. No one dared to provoke the White Dragon Gate. It was simply terrifying. Therefore, when Chu Mu came to White Dragon Town and asked about the location of the White Dragon Gate in a tavern, everyone in the tavern instantly left their seats and rushed out of the tavern, including the tavern's manager and waiter. They all stared at Chu Mu with frightened eyes, as if Chu Mu was some kind of scourge. I come from the genius small world. I accepted the mission to eradicate the White Dragon Gate, Chu Mu said. Everyone looked at each other. After a while, a bolder person took a few steps forward. Sir, are you really here to eradicate the White Dragon Gate? He asked. That's right, Chu Mu nodded. His tone was very firm. His voice was indifferent, and it carried a kind of power that made people believe him. Chu Mu's mental power was very strong. His words carried his mental fluctuations, and the other party was just a weakling who couldn't resist. He immediately believed in Chu Mu. The White Dragon Gate is over there. The person's tone was excited. He pointed in a direction and said, Sir, as long as you keep going in that direction, you will see the mountain gate of the White Dragon Gate. The other people's expressions changed drastically. They hurriedly retreated as if they were escaping from a plague. Thank you, Chu Mu said. His figure flashed and left the tavern, disappearing in front of everyone's eyes. It was as if what happened just now was just an illusion. After Chu Mu left, the person who gave him directions woke up after a while. He knew what he had said and done. His expression changed drastically. His face was pale, and he was drenched in cold sweat. His whole body was trembling. Chu Mu's speed was extremely fast. He flew in the direction that the person had pointed. As a sect, the White Dragon Gate would have a more eye-catching building. Therefore, Chu Mu didn't need to know the exact location of the White Dragon Gate. He only needed to know the general direction. After about half an hour, Chu Mu saw a mountain gate. The mountain gate was milky white and was made of precious white jade. It was like an arch and was very huge. It was at least 100 meters tall. There were exquisite dragon carvings on the arch. They were very lifelike, as if they were about to come to life and soar into the sky. Such a mountain gate was even more luxurious than the true sword sect's mountain gate. It had to be said that the White Dragon Gate, which preyed on the common people, was rich. Looking at this luxurious mountain gate, Chu Mu's interest in the White Dragon Gate increased. During the mission, everything one obtained would belong to the individual. After completing the mission, one would also receive the reward from the small world of geniuses. Speaking of which, it was killing two birds with one stone. If the mission was simple, the rewards during the mission would be more ordinary and not worth paying attention to. However, the mission to eradicate the White Dragon Gate seemed to have a pretty good reward. At the mountain gate of the White Dragon Gate, there were 2 Nirvana realm cultivators guarding it. They were expressionless and had cold expressions. When Chu Mu appeared, their eyes shot out a sharp light. The light was as sharp as a sword and shot out. It pierced through the void and landed on Chu Mu's face, as if it wanted to pierce through Chu Mu. Chu Mu could feel a sense of ferocity from their eyes. These 2 people were definitely people whose hands were stained with a lot of blood. Stop. Who are you? Why have you come to our sect? One of them blocked Chu Mu's path and shouted. I'm here to eradicate the White Dragon Gate. Chu Mu said neither slowly nor quickly. This sentence immediately stunned the 2 people. They thought they were hallucinating. What did he say? He came here to eradicate the White Dragon Gate? He was just a Nirvana realm cultivator? Although they couldn't see Chu Mu's exact cultivation, his aura did belong to the Nirvana realm. A Nirvana realm cultivator wanted to be enemies with the White Dragon Gate. Wasn't he courting death? Chapter 1494. I'll give you one last chance. Turn around and scram out of here. Otherwise, I'll let you know what it means to wish you were dead. A disciple of the White Dragon Gate pointed at Chu Mu and shouted threateningly. Chu Mu couldn't help but laugh. Disciples of small sects in remote places could only be kings in a limited area. Their knowledge was shallow and their awareness couldn't keep up. They thought that they were very powerful. For example, the White Dragon Gate's gate master and 4 elders were low-level martial saints. To many people, they were godlike existences. However, to the true experts they were nothing. However, the White Dragon Gate was located in a remote area and had little contact with the outside world. Their information wasn't smooth enough, and it felt like they were frogs in a well. It had to be said that this was a kind of tragedy. Therefore, when Chu-Mu heard a low-level Nirvana realm martial artist hooting in front of him and threatening him to wish he was dead, he didn't feel angry at all. He only felt that it was very funny. Would you care about an ant baring its fangs and brandishing its claws in front of you? If you felt angry because of this, it could only mean that your temperament wasn't enough. Looks like you're courting death. Seeing the smile that flashed across Chu-Mu's face, the other party was instantly enraged. His face turned gloomy and a murderous aura burst out from the corner of his eyes. Without hesitation, he unsheathed the sword on his back. The cold sword light was like autumn water as it flashed by. A cold air attacked and a murderous aura approached. The other one didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms and sneered. In the blink of an eye, his sword had already cut through the air and slashed towards Chu-Mu's arm. He wanted to cut off Chu-Mu's arm and slowly torture him to death. However, this was a beautiful idea that couldn't be realized. Chu-Mu didn't even draw his sword. He just stretched out his hand and used his index and middle fingers to gently pinch the sword edge that was slashing towards him. It was as if the sword edge was stuck in an ancient boulder and didn't move an inch. Chu-Mu exerted force with 2 fingers and twisted the sword. An ear-piercing sound that made one's scalp go numb rang out. The tip of the sword was forcibly broken by Chu-Mu's 2 fingers. Chu-Mu gently flicked his 2 fingers, and under the other party's shocked expression, the broken tip of the sword pierced through the air like lightning. With a flash of light, it entered the other party's forehead. The eyes of the other low-level Rebirth Realm expert opened wide to the point his eyeballs bulged out, and his face was covered in shock. He was terrified to the point his soul almost left his body, and he was unable to react for a time. With a flick of his finger, a sword light tore through the air and pierced through the other party's glabella. The other party was killed before he could even make a sound. Chu-Mu glanced at the 2 corpses and stretched out his hand to grab the air. 2 spatial rings flew up and landed in his hand. Then, he walked into the White Dragon Gate. According to the information in the small world of geniuses, the total number of people in the White Dragon Gate, from the Gate Master to the disciples, did not exceed 1,000. Among them, there were 5 martial saints, hundreds of Nirvana martial saints, and the rest were God-congealing martial saints and origin martial saints. With 2 low-level Nirvana realm experts guarding the gate, those who didn't understand would misunderstand how powerful the White Dragon Gate was. In reality, it was just a method to confuse the outside world. Walking into the White Dragon Gate, Chu-Mu met many White Dragon Gate disciples along the way. Most of these people were either in the Spirit Condensation realm or the Origin realm. When they saw Chu-Mu, they were all puzzled because this was an unfamiliar face. "Who are you? Why have you come to my White Dragon Gate?" As he walked, Chu-Mu was stopped by a group of Spirit Condensation realm experts. Chu-Mu only glanced at them. His calm gaze startled the other party. It was as if they had been immobilized and they didn't dare to move. Their faces were pale, and they were drenched in cold sweat. That glance allowed them to see a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It was just a group of Origin Realm and Spirit Condensation Realm experts. Chu-Mu wasn't interested in making a move. After he entered the White Dragon Gate, he didn't advance in a straight line. Instead, he advanced in a zigzag manner. Sometimes, he would stop to take a look and ponder. Then, he would shoot out a few sword lights to hit the ground, but nothing happened. After repeating this a few times, a smile flashed across Chu-Mu's face. He nodded and flew into the sky, towards the depths of the White Dragon Gate. That was where the White Dragon Hall was located. People of the White Dragon Gate, listen up. After today, the White Dragon Gate will no longer exist. Take this opportunity to leave the White Dragon Gate. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Chu-Mu stood above the White Dragon Hall and spoke. His voice instantly spread throughout the entire White Dragon Gate and entered everyone's ears. "Who is that? He actually dares to be so arrogant." The White Dragon Gate disciples were enraged. Below, a figure instantly broke through the sky like a sword of light and appeared in front of Chu Mu. It was a cultivator with triangular eyes. His aura was fluctuating, and he had reached the high-level Nirvana realm. It was pretty good that a small, remote sect like the White Dragon Gate actually had a high-level Nirvana realm expert. Its second senior brother True Dragon. Second senior brother True Dragon is at the seventh heaven of the Nirvana realm. He is very strong. The other party is dead for sure. The White Dragon Gate disciples all cheered. In the White Dragon Gate, the disciples were divided into Python Dragon, Flood Dragon, and True Dragon from the lowest to the highest. They corresponded to the Origin Realm, God Congealing Realm, and Nirvana Realm respectively. "How dare you come to the White Dragon Gate and behave so atrociously? You must be tired of living." Triangular Eyes smiled sinisterly. "The one who is tired of living is you." Chu Mu smiled faintly and said, "You are courting death." Triangular Eyes was enraged. He drew his sword and slashed towards Chu Mu as if he was splitting the sky. Shao Qin casually waved his sword finger, and a sword light was thrown out like a long whip. With a pause sound, the void shook, and Triangular Eye's sword was broken. Chu Mu pointed his sword light, and to Triangular Eye's horror, it slashed down and split him into two. Triangular Eye's body was split into two from the center of his brows and fell down. When the disciples of the White Dragon Gate saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. In their hearts, second senior brother True Dragon, who was extremely powerful, had been killed in an instant by the other party so easily. This was impossible. They could not believe it. They could not believe it. "Junior, how dare you?" A loud shout came from the White Dragon Palace, accompanied by a huge pressure that locked onto Chu Mu in the sky. This was the aura of a martial saint expert. Immediately after, a figure soared into the sky from the White Dragon Palace and appeared in front of Chu Mu in the blink of an eye. Fourth Elder. Fourth Elder is a martial saint expert. With him taking action, the other party is dead for sure. The White Dragon Gate disciples' shock was replaced by surprise. In their hearts, saint-level experts were high and mighty, incomparably tyrannical existences. When Fourth Elder took action, no matter who the opponent was, they would die. This was what they knew in their hearts. It was also the sorrow of not having enough experience. Finally, someone with a bit of weight has come. Chu Mu was enveloped by Fourth Elder's violent aura. He should have been trembling, but he was calm as if he didn't feel anything. This made Fourth Elder's eyes narrow. While he was puzzled, he also felt that something was wrong. He was an expert of the first sky of the Aeon, a one-star martial saint. Even if he was one of the lowest martial saints, he was many times stronger than a Nirvana realm expert. He could see that the other party's cultivation was only at the peak of the eighth sky of the Nirvana realm. How could the other party resist his aura? Fourth Elder wasn't like the White Dragon Gate disciples. He had traveled outside in his early years and knew that there were some geniuses who could resist the aura of a martial saint expert to a certain extent. He also knew that there were some secret treasures that could do this. No matter what situation the person in front of him was in, he couldn't underestimate him. This was also the reason why he didn't take action immediately. "Junior, who are you? Why are you going against my White Dragon Gate?" Fourth Elder stared at Chu Mu as if he wanted to see through Chu Mu. "My name is Chu Mu. The White Dragon Gate has done a lot of evil. Today, I'm here to eradicate the White Dragon Gate and return the White Dragon Town to its former glory," Chu Mu said in a clear voice. His voice spread out and entered everyone's ears. Chu Mu. The White Dragon Gate disciples looked at each other in dismay. It had to be said that this place was ill-informed. However, Fourth Elder's expression suddenly changed. He had heard of this name before because it had spread like wildfire a while ago. "You're Chu Mu from the genius small world?" Fourth elder asked to confirm. "Oh, so you know me too." Chu Mu smiled faintly. "However, let's not talk nonsense now. I'm here to eradicate the White Dragon Gate." As soon as he said that, Shao Chen unsheathed the heaven-slaying sword. Sword light was sharp as it tore through the void. The sword silently stabbed towards Fourth Elder. This sword was too fast and soundless, making it hard to guard against. Fourth Elder never would have thought that Chu Mu would attack as soon as he said he would, not giving him any time to prepare. A wisp of sword light instantly pierced through the sky and arrived. The Fourth Elder didn't have time to react. He could only see a faint sword light reflected in his pupils. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but no sound came out. His consciousness quickly sank into darkness as if he had fallen into an abyss. There was a fine wound in between his eyebrows. It was a wound caused by a sword. His soul was also shattered by Chu Mu's eternal sword intent. One sword killed a sage. Fourth Elder's corpse fell headfirst. His interspatial ring had already fallen into Chu Mu's hands. Fourth Elder was killed. Fourth Elder is dead. True Dragon's second senior brother's death only caused the White Dragon Gate disciples to feel disbelief. However, the Fourth Elder's death caused panic, a great panic. The White Dragon Gate disciples scurried around like headless flies, quickly fleeing. The person who killed Fourth Elder with one sword strike was not someone they could fight against. If they wanted to make an enemy out of him, they would be tired of not dying fast enough. The White Dragon Gate has a sect master and Fourth Elder. Now that one elder is dead, there are still 3 elders and a sect master. Why are they not coming out? Chu Mu did not feel excited when he killed Fourth Elder with one sword strike. To him, this was too normal. Shao Chen raised his sword, and a sword light spread out from the sword. It was like a crescent moon rising in the sky, illuminating the world. When the sword descended, the 10-meter-long crescent sword light descended. Shao Chen chopped at the White Dragon Palace. Just as the 10-meter-long crescent sword light was about to split the White Dragon Palace in half, a huge fireball soared up from the White Dragon Palace. It carried a terrifyingly high temperature and strong force as it clashed with the crescent sword light. Chapter 1495. In the sky above the White Dragon Palace, Chu Mu was surrounded. There were 3 people surrounding Chu Mu, 3 old men. They were the First Elder, Second Elder, and Third Elder of the White Dragon Gate. The First Elder and Second Elder were 2-star martial sages. The Third Elder and Fourth Elder were 1-star martial sages. However, Chu Mu had already killed the Fourth Elder. At this moment, the 3 elders stared at Chu Mu with sullen expressions. Their eyes flickered with sharp killing intent. Below, a corner of the originally tall and majestic White Dragon Palace had collapsed, becoming dilapidated. Many cracks appeared in the surrounding ground as well. Hundreds of corpses lay in the distance. This miserable scene was the result of Chu Mu's 10-meter-long waning moon sword light colliding with the Second Elder's huge fireball. The might of the explosion from the collision was shockingly tyrannical. A corner of the magnificent White Dragon Palace was destroyed. The ground shattered, and the corner of the wall containing energy shot out and struck all the White Dragon Gate disciples in the distance. They could not resist at all, and their bodies were destroyed and they died. This was not a small loss. Even if they killed this person in the end, the White Dragon Gate's prestige would be damaged. No matter who you are or where you came from, you must die today. The Second Elder gritted his teeth as he spoke to Chu Mu with a sullen expression. He blamed all the losses on Chu Mu. "The one who will die is not me but you all," Shao Chen said indifferently. Then, he moved his arm. The heaven-slashing sword seemed to stretch out like an illusion as it pierced towards the Second Elder. Shao Chen instantly killed the Fourth Elder with one sword strike. It was undeniably terrifying. The Second Elder's expression changed as he quickly retreated. He quickly waved his hands and formed a fire technique hand seal. Unexpectedly, Chu Mu's sword strike was like the moon reflected in the water. It twisted and stabbed towards the third elder. The change was too fast. The third elder could not react in time. This sword strike was also a soundless sword move that was hard to detect. Third brother. The first elder and second elder were horrified and shocked. Their teeth were about to crack. However, their shouts were unable to save the third elder's life. He was merely a one-star martial saint and not a genius. In front of Chu Mu, he had no power to resist at all. He decisively took her life with a single strike. Only the first elder and the second elder were left. The flames in the sky condensed into fist-sized fireballs. They were red with traces of white, and they gave off a terrifyingly high temperature. Each fireball contained terrifying power. Whistling sounds could be heard as hundreds of fireballs shot toward Chu Mu. The Grand Elder retreated at top speed, putting some distance between himself and Meng Hao. Lightning crackled around him as he leaped and weaved through the air. His hands flickered as he performed incantation gestures. Up above, strands of blackness spread out, forming a black cloud that rapidly expanded. This was the Thunder Art, a powerful Thunder Art. The Grand Elder intended to use this powerful Thunder Art to kill Chu Mu and turn him into ashes. Hundreds of fireballs shot toward Chu Mu, and the temperature in the air rose sharply, almost roasting people into jerky. The gathering of the black clouds in the sky also brought a heavy pressure to Chu Mu. As he waved the heaven-beheading sword, Chu Mu bent his body slightly. Streams of power emerged from his body in an instant, infusing into the sword and condensing. In front of him, strands of mist appeared. They spread out, danced, and condensed into white clouds. At first glance, there were layers of white clouds, and there were endless clouds. At second glance, there was only a clear sky, and there was nothing. One's line of sight alternated between the white clouds and the clear sky, making one dizzy. The faintly discernible white clouds filled the surrounding space with a sticky power. Like water, the hundreds of fireballs entered the space, and their speed slowed down immediately. The black clouds in the sky finished condensing. Scarlet lightning shuttled through them like countless venomous snakes, quickly gathering in the center of the black clouds. A scarlet lightning bolt as thick as a thigh condensed. It was like a lightning dragon stretching out its head. Its ferocious head and tyrannical gaze were the epitome of destruction. A horrifying aura suddenly descended. This scarlet lightning dragon instantly tore through the sky and charged out of the black cloud. It swooped down and locked onto Chu Mu. Chu Mu felt that he was locked on, and he found it hard to move. Cloud-piercing sword style. Xiao Qin shouted. These 4 words rose and fell with a strange pitch. As they vibrated, they guided the aura locked onto him, twisting it. In that instant, his body broke free from the lock of the scarlet lightning dragon, and he drew his sword. A thin but sharp sword light instantly tore through the sky. It pierced through the faintly discernible white clouds and shot towards the second elder with unparalleled speed and startling condensed energy. That cloud-white sword light pierced through the many fireballs and scattered them. Chu Mu seemed to merge with the sword in his hand. I am the sword, and the sword is me. When the scarlet lightning dragon descended, it lost its target. It pierced through the void and bombarded the White Dragon Palace below. The White Dragon Palace, which had a corner damaged, was unable to stop it. The Scarlet Lightning Dragon's attack severely damaged the White Dragon Palace again. Rumbling resounded continuously. The ground trembled, and the White Dragon Palace continuously crumbled. Terrifying scarlet lightning spread out in all directions, moving about everywhere. However, Chu Mu had already appeared before the second elder. Then, he pierced the second elder's forehead with his sword, killing him. This was the first time the cloud-piercing sword style worked. This was the first time Chu Mu used the cloud-piercing sword style in actual combat after perfecting it. The might of the cloud-piercing sword style did not exceed Chu Mu's expectations. Chu Mu was very satisfied with it. However, there were still some areas that needed to be improved. Some fine areas needed to be adjusted. Second Elder. The second Elder's attack did not work. Instead, he died to Chu Mu's sword. This scene nearly drove the first Elder crazy. Don't rush. It will be your turn soon. Chu Mu smiled faintly. Then, he spun around in the air like a swallow returning. His sword left a faint trajectory in the air. The eternal sword intense fluctuations lingered for a long time as it flew towards the first Elder. In the end, the White Dragon Gate was just a motley crew. It did not have much accumulations and had not formed a true inheritance. What the 4 Elders were proficient in had nothing to do with the White Dragon Gate. The first Elder specialized in thunder skills. Although thunder skills were very strong, they were relatively troublesome to execute. The first Elder was a late-stage 2-star martial saint expert. He had extraordinary strength and was not easy to deal with. However, Chu Mu's cultivation had increased a little. His swordsmanship had improved, and his strength had also increased by a lot. His figure instantly flew through the air, dodging the bolts of lightning that the great Elder shot out. Instantly, a figure stopped in midair. It was vivid and lifelike. Astonishingly, it was Chu Mu's appearance, and it quickly charged towards the great Elder. The afterimage is actually so lifelike. The first Elder's eyelids twitched. He was unable to distinguish between the real and fake Chu Mu. He could only expend more energy and release a large amount of lightning to attack the 2 Chu Mu. This was the effect of the Sword Chi afterimage. The Sword Chi afterimage had no offensive power or resistance. Under the first Elder's lightning, it was shattered in an instant. Chu Mu swung his sword to cut through the lightning and charge towards the first Elder. He wanted to kill him with a single strike. The first Elder was horrified. At this moment, a strong sense of danger appeared. It made Chu Mu's scalp tingle. It was cold and sharp, as if it was going to cut his body in half and mince him into pieces. This was Sword Intent, a powerful Sword Intent. A Sword Intent that surpassed the 2-star saint rank had locked onto Chu Mu from afar. This was a Sword Saint, a very powerful one. He was even more powerful than the first Elder. This Sword Intent was quite far away. Before the person arrived, the Sword Intent had already arrived. It locked onto Chu Mu, warning him not to make a move. Although this Sword Intent was powerful, it was not unbearable. Chu Mu did not stop at all. He continued to charge towards the first Elder with his sword. The Sword Chi afterimage confused the first Elder's vision. After the Silent Sword style, he used the Sky Strike Sword style and the Star Breaking Sword style to kill the first Elder. The Sword Intent that locked onto Chu Mu suddenly became violent. It was filled with killing intent. Obviously, the owner of the Sword Intent was furious that Chu Mu did not fear his threat and killed the first Elder. Sect Leader Bai, I have been waiting for you for a long time, Chu Mu said loudly. Without hesitation, he activated the secret power in his body and activated the Sword God's Descent secret technique. A strange sharpness spread out from Chu Mu's body. In an instant, a tall figure seemed to appear behind him. The figure was pitch black, and its eyes emitted an extremely cold light that pierced through the void. The pitch-black figure entered Chu Mu's body. In an instant, Chu Mu felt an extremely powerful force surging in his body. That force increased his strength by 10 times. His body was stronger, his speed was faster, and his sword was sharper. This was the Sword God's Descent secret technique. The sect leader of the White Dragon sect, Lu Bailong, was a 3-star sword saint. He was an expert. Under normal circumstances, the current Chu Mu was no match for him. After being strengthened by 10 times, Chu Mu's strength became even more terrifying. If he were to face the first Elder again, there was no need for him to use the Sword Chi afterimage. He could kill the first Elder with a single strike. After his strength increased by 10 times, facing the increasingly powerful Sword Intent, Chu Mu was able to withstand it with ease. Every secret technique had its own specialty. For example, the Sword Qi origin secret technique that Ao Zhenheng used had the advantage of Sword Qi. For example, Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness origin secret technique also had the advantage of Sword Qi. The Sword God's Descent secret technique was different. Its focus was not on Sword Qi, but on the sharpness of the sword. As the name implied, the Sword God's Descent secret technique was directly related to the sword. Chu Mu felt that after using the Sword God's Descent secret technique, his strength and speed had increased a little. It was very obvious. However, the most obvious thing was the sharpness, which was the amplification of Sword Qi, and the sword in his hand. At this moment, a figure appeared in front of him, rapidly approaching. Divine Wilderness. Origin. With a low shout, Chu Mu used the secret technique for the second time, Divine Wilderness Origin secret technique. According to the information, Lu Bailong was a 3-star sword saint, who was more powerful than an initial 3-star martial saint expert. Chu Mu was not sure if he could fight against him if he only used the Sword God's Descent secret technique. Therefore, it was necessary to use the Divine Wilderness Origin secret technique to further enhance his strength. Chapter 1496. Lu Bailong appeared in front of Chu Mu, wearing a cyan robe and holding a cyan longsword in his hand. Speaking of appearance, Lu Bailong was not bad at all. He was handsome and had the temperament of a sword saint. He had the ability to charm many women. It was hard to tell from his appearance that he was the leader of the White Dragon Gate. He was very ferocious. At this time, Lu Bailong's eyes were shining with cold light. Like ice crystals, his eyes shot towards Chu Mu. That kind of killing intent was not concealed at all. It attacked like a storm, causing snowflakes to appear in the void. It was like a dream. Below, when the disciples of the White Dragon Gate who were still alive saw their leader appear, the fear on their faces disappeared and turned into fanaticism. In their minds, their leader was the most powerful. As long as their leader took action, everything would go smoothly. Because even the 4 elders were no match for their leader. This was a kind of blindness. They did not know how terrifying the man in front of them was, even though he was only at the peak of the 8th sky of Nirvana realm. The astonishing sword intent with extreme coldness indicated that the sword intent Lu Bailong had mastered was not an ordinary sword intent, but an elemental sword intent. Even though it was only an ordinary ice sword intent, it also indicated that Lu Bailong's talent in swordsmanship was not something ordinary sword cultivators could compare with. No matter who you are, you destroyed my White Dragon Palace and killed my 4 elders and many disciples. You must die. Lu Bailong pointed his sword at Chu Mu. Sword Qi grew around the sword and condensed into a small cyclone, making a harsh whistling sound. Hundreds of meters away, Chu Mu felt like he was being torn apart by a storm. Lu Bailong's application of his sword intent had reached a very profound level. He had almost entered the realm of affecting reality with illusions. The more powerful Lu Bailong was, the more excited Chu Mu was. Eradicating the White Dragon Gate was the mission. Fighting with experts was the way to hone oneself. As long as Lu Bailong's strength did not exceed the limit that Chu Mu could bear, he hoped that Lu Bailong's strength could be further improved. In this way, the training would be more obvious. I've already heard this sentence. So the 4 elders are already dead. Next, it's your turn, Chu Mu said. The eternal sword will circled around his body, resisting the invasion of the icy sword will. In terms of quality, the eternal sword intent was far superior to the frost sword intent. However, in terms of level, the frost sword intent was the sword intent of a 3-star sword saint, while Chu Mu's eternal sword intent was still in the Nirvana realm. Because the quality was far superior, the eternal sword intent could resist the ice sword intent to a certain extent, which surprised Lu Bailong. However, he was not in the mood to study it now. He wanted to kill Chu Mu in front of all the living disciples of the White Dragon Gate. A sharp tongue won't bring you any benefits. Lu Bailong bellowed and flicked the tip of his sword. A stream of cyan and white sword chi broke through the air and shot toward Chu Mu, carrying the cutting wind and the coldness of ice. Without dodging, Chu Mu slashed out with his sword and shattered the sword chi. Under the dual secret techniques of Sword God Descends and Divine Wilderness Convergence, his strength had increased to a very terrifying level. He had no need to be afraid. However, the secret techniques could not last for too long. He had to end the battle within the duration of the secret technique. The only way to end the battle was to kill Lu Bailong. Waiting for death was not Chu Mu's style. Taking the initiative to attack was the way of the king. He grasped the void with his left hand, and the imperishable sword appeared. His right hand was holding the heaven slash and his left hand was holding the imperishable sword. The two swords were raised and vibrated. Suddenly, a powerful driving force was generated, causing Chu Mu's speed to reach the extreme in an instant. The two swords crossed, broke through the air resistance, and rushed toward Lu Bailong. In an instant, Chu Mu arrived in front of Lu Bailong. The cross-sword light was extremely sharp. Die! Lu Bailong shouted in a low voice and slashed out with his sword. A storm was generated around him, whistling and tearing everything apart. An icy aura descended and froze the surroundings. The terrifying sword flashed in the storm and rushed toward Chu Mu. Under the terrifying power of a 3-star sword saint, Chu Mu's body was directly slashed and minced. However, that was just the sword chi shadow. Even Lu Bailong was deceived. Chu Mu's real body appeared behind Lu Bailong. He stabbed out with his sword silently. It was the silent sword style. Its speed was astonishingly fast. Although Lu Bailong could not feel it, he was alerted. He immediately dodged and slashed out with his sword. The terrifying cold invaded and froze the void. A layer of frost quickly covered Chu Mu's body. His whole body shook. Under the surge of tyrannical power, the frost was shattered. Chu Mu's sword chi shadow was shattered, but his real body had already appeared in another place. The sword chi shadow that he perfected contained amazing mysteries, which greatly improved Chu Mu's survival ability in a battle. A person's strength was composed of various aspects, such as attack power, defense power, recovery power, survival power, and so on. If one lacked any of these aspects, it might become a fatal shortcoming. Only when one had the strength in all aspects and reached a strong level could one's strength reach the strongest level. Lu Bailong launched his swordsmanship. Snow was flying, ice was bursting, and hurricanes were raging one move after another. Powerful swordsmanship was performed under Lu Bailong's sword. The terrifying power filled the surroundings and the void. The area within a radius of thousands of meters was almost frozen into ice. The temperature dropped sharply, affecting people's blood and nerves. Under the strong cold air, Chu Mu could not avoid it. The duration of the secret method was limited. Chu Mu could not fight Lu Bailong slowly. He had to finish Lu Bailong as quickly as possible to end the battle. In an instant, Chu Mu launched his sword realm. In an instant, the sword realm covered a range of 2 kilometers. With the improvement of Chu Mu's strength and the deepening of his understanding of swordsmanship and sword principle, the sword realm had also made good progress. It had increased from the initial 1 kilometer to the current 2 kilometers. In a sense, the increase of the sword realm also represented the increase of the power of the sword realm. Lu Bailong was a 3-star sword saint. In terms of cultivation, he was much stronger than Chu Mu. The sword realm could not suppress Lu Bailong, but it could increase Chu Mu's strength and speed, which further improved his strength. The increase in strength and speed brought by the sword realm was nothing for a non-body cultivator. It would not increase one's strength by much, but for Chu Mu, who was proficient in body cultivation, it had a very strong increase. Originally, under the combination of Divine Wilderness Origin Returning and Sword God Descent, Chu Mu's strength was infinitely close to Lu Bailong's. With his exquisite and powerful sword technique, he was able to fight Lu Bailong without losing. Now, under the sword domain, his strength and speed had received a clear increase. His strength had further increased. In terms of absolute strength, he had already surpassed Lu Bailong. A sword cultivator like Chu Mu had a very unique grasp of strength. He could apply every bit of strength to the essence and fully exert its power. Therefore, under the application of Chu Mu's absolute strength, which was better than Lu Bailong's, would be multiplied, making his strength much stronger than Lu Bailong. Lu Bailong found that he was beginning to be suppressed and fell into a disadvantage. Lu Bailong's expression changed drastically as he roared. Strands of blood appeared in his eyes. As the strands of blood circled around him, his aura became even stronger. The white ice flowers in the air gradually turned faint red and were dyed with a layer of blood-red light. Lu Bailong had launched a secret method. The pale red ice flowers had evil power. Faint sounds spread like whispers and cries, but also a little sharp. They were like demonic sounds, disturbing people's minds. Under the influence of the secret method, Lu Bailong's aura was extremely evil. Chu Mu could tell at a glance that Lu Bailong's secret method was definitely practiced with blood. That was to say, his purpose of killing people was to practice such an evil secret method. The eternal sword intent guarded the spiritual world, which was impervious to all evil. It was unaffected by the cries of Lu Bailong's secret method, the cries of the blood-colored ice flowers. It should be noted that Chu Mu's soul force was far superior to that of people at the same level. It was comparable to a 2-star martial sage expert. With the help of the top-level eternal sword intent, although Lu Bailong's evil secret method was powerful, it could not pose a threat to him. It had to be said that Lu Bailong had met his nemesis. This was probably something even Lu Bailong didn't expect. By the time he realized it, he was already suppressed by Chu Mu. The two swords kept attacking. The sword chi was launched again and again. The sword essence was constantly consumed. Lu Bailong was in a dilemma. Silent sword style. Sky attack sword style. Star-breaking sword style. The power of the three sword styles was so strong that Lu Bailong struggled to cope with them. White clouds were looming. The blood-colored ice flowers were also affected and became sluggish. The sword pierced out as if it had pierced through thousands of clouds. Under the sword thrust true meaning, its sharpness was unstoppable. Cloud-piercing sword style. Lu Bailong hastily dodged. A swooshing sound was heard next to his ear, followed by an intense pain. One of his ears had been pierced through by the cloud-piercing sword style. Under the control of the eternal sword will, the horrifying sword-piercing true meaning stayed at the ear, bringing Lu Bailong intense pain. The heaven-beheading sword was raised high. A terrible power spread out from the sword. Then, the sword slashed down. This sword strike could slash through all hardness and slash open all space. It possessed the resolution and great courage to press forward courageously, and even if it was a god, it would still be able to kill it. God-beheading sword style. In addition to perfecting the cloud-piercing sword style, Chu Mu had also mastered the god-beheading sword style. Although he had not comprehended the sword intent, the power of the god-beheading sword style was still very strong. Without the sword intent, the lethality of the god-beheading sword style was even stronger than the star-breaking sword style. This sword locked onto Lu Bailong. In an instant, he was intimidated and could not move. His heart was filled with despair. The heaven-beheading sword slashed down. After countless years, the god-beheading sword style bloomed its brilliance once again. Lu Bailong tried his best to dodge and resist. However, he could not do so. The eternal sword intent and the sword thrust true meaning were constantly disturbing and distracting his mind. When the disciples of the White Dragon Gate looked up, they only saw a dazzling sword light that seemed to penetrate the heaven and earth. It fell down like it was going to kill gods and devils. It engulfed the body of their leader. Chapter 1497. God-slaying sword style. God-slaying with a sword. The dazzling sword light came down from the top, tearing the sky and penetrating the earth. Lu Bailong, the head of the White Dragon Gate, was unable to dodge or resist. He could only stare at the dazzling sword light, which was astonishingly sharp, falling down with fear and horror. There was no pain as he imagined. He only felt that his soul and body were split into two. His consciousness quickly fell into darkness. The imperishable sword disappeared. Chumu grabbed with his left hand, and Lu Bailong's sword and spatial ring all fell into Chumu's hand. Chumu put them away for now. Lu Bailong's corpse that was cut in half fell down. With two loud bangs they landed on the ground, creating two craters. He's dead. Our leader is dead. The disciples of the White Dragon Gate, no matter what level they were at, were all in a daze. They couldn't believe what they saw. It was like an illusion, like a dream. 4 elders and a leader, all of them were martial saint experts. But now they were killed by a Nirvana realm expert. This was against the law of cultivation. It was impossible. After killing Lu Bailong, Chumu immediately stopped using the sword god's descent. The power of the secret technique had been consumed by 80%. The remaining 20% could only be recovered slowly with the passage of time. If he wanted to recover quickly, he could only absorb the essence of the 5 elements. But that was too extravagant. He also stopped using the Divine Wilderness Convergence secret technique. Otherwise, it would put a great burden on his body. Even if he stopped using the 2 secret techniques, the disciples of the White Dragon Gate below were not Chumu's opponent. They were scared out of their wit. The leader of the White Dragon Gate, Lu Bailong, and the 4 elders have done a lot of evil. Today, Chumu will eradicate them. The White Dragon Gate will disappear from now on. You all leave this place immediately. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. Chumu said loudly. His killing intent covered the sky and earth. The disciples of the White Dragon Gate felt like they had fallen into a sea of blood. They were extremely frightened and scared out of their wits. Spare my life. Don't kill me. Save me. I don't want to die. Under the killing intent, these people's minds were destroyed. They couldn't even muster up the will to resist. They only had fear and panic, and could only beg for mercy. Even if Chumu didn't kill them today, the shadow of Chumu's invincibility had been left in their hearts. Even the 4 great elders and sect leader, who were incomparably tyrannical in their hearts, had died under Chumu's sword. Witnessing it with their own eyes, that kind of shock, that kind of impact to their hearts, couldn't be described with words. In a situation where their hearts were already filled with fear, Chumu's killing intent invaded their hearts and souls, unknowingly leaving behind an inner demon. In the future, even if some of these people had a fortuitous encounter and became stronger, they would still be subconsciously afraid of Chumu. Even if they were stronger than Chumu, when facing Chumu, they would not be able to display their true strength. At most, they would only be able to display half of their strength. Of course, this was just an assumption. If they improved, Chumu's improvement would only be greater. The gap between them would only grow bigger and bigger. In their entire lives, they would not have the chance to defeat Chumu. This was a kind of confidence, an absolute confidence. Withdrawing the killing intent, these surviving disciples of the White Dragon Gate did not dare to have any other thoughts at all. Each of them wished that they could grow a few more legs and a few more pairs of wings to quickly escape from this place. Their minds had been destroyed by Chumu. If there were no accidents, they would only become trash. At this point, Chumu's mission was completed. However, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he entered the White Dragon Palace and searched. More than half of the White Dragon Palace had collapsed like a ruin. However, it was still a sect. Lu Bailong had committed many evil deeds and plundered everywhere. He must have obtained a lot of treasures. Chumu would not let him go no matter what. Under the penetration of the power of divine sense, Chumu found a place that seemed to be a treasure vault. He waved his sword and slashed. Under many slashes, the door of the treasure vault was destroyed. Chu-mu entered. This was indeed a treasure vault. Many metal ores were neatly arranged. There was a small sign in front of each ore. The name of the ore and its characteristics were written on it. In addition, there were spiritual herbs. There were 100-year-old and 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs. There were even a few 10,000-year-old spiritual herbs. However, the White Dragon Gate's foundation was insufficient. There were only metal ores and spiritual herbs in the treasure vault. There were also a few treasures. Chu-mu glanced at the few treasures. These treasures were not very precious in his opinion. However, there were a few that were needed to cultivate the second layer of the Sword God's Descent secret technique. Suddenly, Chu-mu's gaze was attracted by a treasure. He stared straight at it. Unknowingly, his breathing became rapid. It was a dark blue bead that was wrapped in a layer of invisible energy. It was a seal. The seal isolated the aura of the dark blue bead and prevented it from leaking out. Chu-mu could still see the stars on the dark blue bead. Yes, those were definitely stars. They were very familiar stars. He picked up the bead. The power of divine sense spread out, covered it, analyzed the seal, and then broke it. Suddenly, a deep and vast aura spread out from the dark blue bead. As if it had escaped from a cage, traces of light blue aura spread out and soared into the sky. It's really the dark blue sacred bead. Chu-mu was very excited. He never expected that he would get such a reward after completing this task. There were a total of 18 dark blue sacred beads. Chu-mu had already obtained 2 of them. He did not know where the other 16 were. Even if the Wind Pavilion was well informed, they could not know the details. They could only rely on luck. He did not expect that there was one hidden in the White Dragon Gate. It seemed that Lu Bailong and the 4 elders did not know what was good for them. Therefore, it was necessary to read more books while cultivating. Only then could one master more knowledge. Otherwise, if one encountered a treasure and missed it due to lack of knowledge, it would be very unfair. Immediately, he put the dark blue sacred bead into his portable space. After isolating its aura, Chu-mu also took the other treasures and quickly left the treasury. He soared into the sky and quickly left the White Dragon Gate. The aura released when the dark blue sacred bead was unsealed was not very strong. However, Chu-mu still had to leave as soon as possible. If someone happened to pass by and knew what was good for them, it would be bad if he was discovered. It had to be said that Chu-mu's cautious thinking was very correct. He had encountered that 1 in 10,000 chance. In the sky above the White Dragon Gate, a blue light flashed by rapidly. That speed indicated that he was a martial saint expert. Moreover, he was not a low-level martial saint expert, but a mid-level martial saint expert. This blue figure was extremely fast. Suddenly, he stopped. This was because he vaguely felt a familiar yet strange aura appear tens of thousands of meters away. It flashed by like an illusion. This person stopped. He was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man in loose blue robes. He looked in the direction of the White Dragon Gate with a bewildered gaze. It was empty. He frowned slightly and spread out his spiritual energy. However, he did not discover anything. Could it be an illusion? Doubt flashed in the blue-robed middle-aged man's eyes. Soon after, he decided to go and check it out. A distance of 10,000 meters was nothing to a 5-star martial saint expert like him. The blue-robed middle-aged man turned into a blue beam of light again and streaked across the sky. He quickly flew in the direction of the White Dragon Gate. While he was hesitating, Chu-mu had already left the White Dragon Gate at his fastest speed. In just a short while, the blue-robed middle-aged man arrived above the White Dragon Gate. Oh, there's still the remnant aura of an intense battle. What a shocking sword intent. It actually has an everlasting aura. It's as if it exists eternally between heaven and earth. If it's stronger, it might really exist eternally. The blue-robed middle-aged man was shocked when he sensed it carefully. However, although this everlasting sword intent is shocking, it doesn't seem to be strong enough. The more he sensed it, the more shocked the blue-robed middle-aged man was. His expression kept changing. He had a look of disbelief. He came from the imperial court. His strength and cultivation were similar. He could not challenge those above his level. However, he had a unique talent, which was his sharp sense and grasp of aura. Therefore, he was also sent out by the imperial court to search for treasures and the whereabouts of the deep blue divine pearl. This method was like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, this was all he could do for now. Nirvana realm. The person who has this everlasting sword intent is actually just a Nirvana realm cultivator. The shock lasted for a long while before he reacted. He quickly descended and entered the dilapidated White Dragon Palace. He found the treasury. The treasury had already been emptied out. The blue-robed middle-aged man did not care about this. He entered the treasury and came to where the treasures were originally stored. It's very weak, but there's no mistaking it. It really is the aura of the deep blue divine pearl. The blue-robed middle-aged man became even more shocked and excited. Looks like the deep blue divine pearl was taken away by that Nirvana realm sword cultivator. Chase him. We have to chase him. Making a prompt decision, the blue-robed group soared into the sky. They broke through the roof of the treasury and rushed into the sky. They sensed the remnant aura carefully and quickly chased in the direction Chu Mu had left in. However, he had hesitated for a while. He had stopped above the White Dragon Gate for a while to sense the aura. He had been shocked by the remnant sword intent for a while before entering the treasury of the White Dragon Palace for a while. All in all, he had spent close to half an hour. Although the blue-robed middle-aged man was several times faster than Chu Mu, it was very, very difficult for him to catch up to Chu Mu in the time difference of close to half an hour. However, the blue-robed middle-aged man had something he could rely on, which was his unique sense of aura. If he could not catch up now, he would continue to follow the aura until he found Chu Mu. After all, Chu Mu had taken the deep blue divine pearl. The deep blue divine pearl was a treasure that the imperial court had been searching for countless years. It was related to the secrets of the deep blue world. He had to obtain it. Chapter 1498. The blue sky was clear and cloudless. A beam of blue light flashed across the sky like a rainbow. It was so fast that it left a faint blue trail behind it. The blue-robed middle-aged man flew at full speed. Not only was he getting closer to Chu Mu, but he also felt that the Nirvana Realm warrior's aura was getting clearer and clearer. Soon, he would be able to catch up. Chu Mu, who was flying at full speed, suddenly had a bad feeling. This feeling often meant that something bad was about to happen. For example, a crisis that he could not resist was approaching. Could it be that the trace of aura that leaked out from the deep blue pearl attracted the warrior? Chu Mu thought to himself. Although he longed to fight with warriors and train himself, the opponent's strength should not be too much higher than his. Now, he felt that the approaching crisis and the opponent's strength were not something he could resist, even if he used the Sword God's Descent and the Divine Wilderness Convergence at the same time. In this case, Chu Mu would not be so stupid as to let the opponent catch up with him. With a thought, a streamlined flying ship that looked like an extremely sharp longsword appeared. This was the extreme peak that the Heavenly Sword Saint Master had lent to Chu Mu. Entering the extreme peak, Yi Futian threw in a large number of upper-grade inner elixirs. Under the burning of these inner elixirs, the extreme peak provided great power to the flying ship. In an instant, the tail of the extreme peak spurted out a terrifying power that was enough to instantly destroy a low-level saint-level warrior. Leaving an extremely sharp roar, the extreme peak had already turned into a beam of light and disappeared into the distance. Not long after, the blue-robed middle-aged man flew to the place where the extreme peak was activated. He stopped for a while and carefully sensed the remaining aura. His face suddenly changed. What a terrifying power, full of destruction! The blue-robed middle-aged man's eyes were filled with shock and horror. That power made him feel threatened. Could it be that there is more than one Nirvana Realm warrior, and at least one mid-level saint-level warrior? No, this destructive aura doesn't seem to be left by a cultivator, but more like a flying ship, I see. Could it be that the opponent has sensed my pursuit? That's impossible. No matter how powerful a Nirvana Realm warrior is, it is impossible for him to sense my pursuit. Various thoughts flashed through the blue-robed middle-aged man's mind unceasingly. Then, he continued to chase after them. However, there was still a clear gap between his speed and the extreme peak. The gap would only grow wider. With the extreme peak's super speed, Chu-Mu soon arrived outside Genius City. Retrieving the extreme peak, he quickly entered the Genius Garden and then the Genius Small World. After an interval of around an hour, the blue-robed middle-aged man followed the aura and arrived outside the Genius Garden. This person is a genius from the Genius Garden. The blue-robed middle-aged man stood outside the Genius Garden and pondered for a dozen breaths of time before he strode into the garden. Within the small world of geniuses, Chu-Mu handed in the mission. After proving that he had completed the mission, he would receive a generous reward. What Chu-Mu valued the most was the contribution point. Looking at the thousands of contribution points he had obtained, Chu-Mu knew that he was getting closer and closer to his goal. He didn't check the mission again because Chu-Mu felt that he was being targeted because of the deep blue pearl he had just obtained. If he immediately accepted the mission and left the small world of geniuses, he would most likely encounter an irresistible danger. He couldn't use the extreme peak every time. That would consume too much energy. Moreover, after the recent missions and the battle with Lu Bailong, he had comprehended the cloud-piercing sword style and so on. He needed to go into seclusion for a while to digest them. While Chu-Mu was in seclusion, the blue-robed middle-aged man from the Imperial Court was depressed. He had passed the Genius Garden's yellow class test and entered the Genius Garden. He wandered around and sensed the aura, but the aura was cut off at a certain point. He couldn't continue to pursue it. If he forced his way in, he would only be killed by the high-level saints guarding the Genius Garden. Only then did he realize that the Nirvana Realm cultivator was a genius from the small world of geniuses. He thought about it and weighed the pros and cons. The deep blue pearl was extremely important. If he could obtain it and offer it up, he would definitely receive a generous reward from the Imperial Court. His status and cultivation would also rise along with it. He would become stronger and wield real power. This was extremely attractive to him. Even if he had to take some risks, he had to obtain the deep blue pearl. He found the upper echelon of the Genius Garden and brought up the idea of entering the small world of geniuses. Although he was only a yellow-class genius, he was still a mid-level saint. The small world of geniuses naturally wouldn't reject him. After going through the formalities, the blue-robed middle-aged man entered the small world of geniuses as he wished. After such a period of time, the aura Chu-Mu had left behind had already faded. Moreover, the small world of geniuses was filled with all sorts of auras. The auras of many geniuses intertwined, making it difficult to distinguish them. Although he was helpless, the blue-robed middle-aged man could only wander around and search for Chu-Mu's aura. In the small world of geniuses, this was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. There seemed to be countless white clouds in Kongming Cave. They gathered and formed a sea of clouds. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing. However, the void was filled with a strange force field. It was like a stagnant swamp. In this strange force field, Chu-Mu's figure seemed to be drifting around, making it difficult to lock onto him. This was the result of Chu-Mu's battle with the White Dragon Gate Grand Elder. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a good thing to be locked onto. With a stab, sword light condensed. There was a stunning brilliance amidst the obscurity. It silently pierced through the void and thousands of white clouds. It was the cloud-piercing sword style that had been further perfected. After going back and forth a few times, Chu-Mu began to practice the god-slaying sword style. Stabbing had its true meaning, slashing had its true meaning as well. Chu Mu's goal was to comprehend the true meaning of slashing. If he could comprehend the true meaning of slashing, even if it was just a superficial understanding, Chu Mu's sword slashes would be much more powerful. Sword styles like the god-slaying sword style that were based on the sever-word formula would become even more terrifying. It could be said that without the true meaning of slashing, the god-slaying sword style was incomplete. Other than the god-slaying sword style, there were a few other sword styles based on the sever-word formula. For example, the void-slashing sword style, the flow-slashing sword style, and the extreme slashing sword style. Just like the 3 sword styles of the stabbing word formula, the silent sword style, the sky strike sword style, the 4 sword styles of the sever word formula, the god-slaying sword style, the void-slashing sword style, the flow-slashing sword style, and the extreme slashing sword style each had their own focus. There were no shortcuts to comprehending the true meaning. The last time he was able to comprehend the true meaning of stabbing was also a coincidence. The current sword Tao was no longer as glorious as it was in ancient times. Many cultivation methods had been lost. Chu Mu could only rely on his monstrous perception to fumble around. The last aura is here. At the foot of Kongming Mountain, a blue-robed middle-aged man appeared. After entering the genius pocket world, the blue-robed middle-aged man had been walking around non-stop, constantly searching for the aura. His hard work paid off. Finally, after more than a month, he found the aura. Looking up at the top of Kongming Mountain, a cave residence vaguely appeared. With a leap, the blue-robed group flew up and soon arrived in front of Kongming Cave. "I am Lan Yu, a newcomer to the genius pocket world. I have come to pay you a visit." The blue-robed middle-aged man stood outside Kongming Cave and shouted loudly. However, Chu Mu didn't hear him. After shouting a few times, there was no response, but Lan Yu knew that the other party was inside Kongming Cave. He attacked the seal, causing the seal to shake and alerting Chu Mu inside Kongming Cave. Soon, Chu Mu arrived outside Kongming Cave. "Who are you?" Chu Mu's tone was indifferent. "This aura, yes, it's you." When Lan Yu saw Chu Mu and felt the aura on his body, his eyes lit up and he directly reached out to grab Chu Mu. However, Chu Mu was already prepared. He took a step back and entered Kongming Cave's seal. Lan Yu's grab was blocked by the seal. This seal was able to resist high-level martial saint. Lan Yu was only a mid-level martial saint, so he couldn't break the seal with brute force. When he attacked just now, it was because he was overjoyed. After being blocked by the seal, Lan Yu came back to his senses. The light in his eyes was sharp, as if it could pierce through the void. Then, he retracted the light and a kind smile appeared on his face. "Junior, I am a deacon of the Imperial Court. Do you know the Imperial Court? It is an extremely powerful organization, founded by a martial saint emperor. It is no weaker than the 4 heavenly gates." Lan Yu smiled. Chu Mu replied indifferently, which made Lan Yu feel depressed. However, he had to maintain his smile and maintain a friendly appearance. "Little friend, the Imperial Court is not only powerful, but it is also more secretive than the 4 heavenly gates. I am a deacon of the Imperial Court and my job is to find true geniuses and nurture them. In the future, it will be easy for them to become martial saints, let alone high-level martial saints. They might even become peerless experts." Lan Yu opened his mouth and tried to tempt Lin Fan. Chu Mu's reaction was still so calm because he already knew what kind of organization the Imperial Court was from Xiaojinkong. Lin Fan's calm reaction almost made Lan Yu go crazy. His desire to get the deep blue god pearl attacked his rationality. But he also understood that if he showed any ill intentions, Lin Fan wouldn't leave the seal and he wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Moreover, if he attacked, he would definitely attract the attention of others. At that time, he wouldn't be able to gain anything. "Little friend, please open the seal and let me in. I will tell you about the Imperial Court in detail." With your talent, once you join the imperial court, you will definitely be nurtured to the highest level and become a peerless expert. Lan Yu continued. He started to try to trick Lin Fan. What is your goal? Just say it. Chu Mu said calmly. He didn't show any signs of opening the seal. He wasn't stupid. Lan Yu was a mid-stage martial saint and he wanted to attack him from the start. Opening the seal was the same as letting a wolf into the house. Little friend, a month ago, in a sect called the White Dragon Gate, did you get a dark blue pearl? This big. Lan Yu described the appearance of the dark blue sacred pearl. That thing, if you get it, I'm willing to buy it from you for 1,000,000 high-grade elemental pills. You are too naive. A trace of disdain flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. He no longer paid attention to Lan Yu and turned around to walk into the cave, leaving behind a stunned and angry Lan Yu. Chapter 1499. Lan Yu trembled in anger. Chu Mu's eyes were filled with disdain and mockery, as if he was mocking his own intelligence. He was a 5-star martial saint, but he was despised by a mere 8th sky of Nirvana realm. How could he accept this? How could he calm down? Most importantly, he'd suppressed the impulse in his heart, squeezed out a kind and friendly smile, and tried his best to entice the other party, yet all he'd received in return was cold treatment, disdain, and disdain. Moreover, he'd failed to obtain the dark blue divine pearl. Lan Yu clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. His whole body was trembling, and the anger in his heart surged. It was like a volcano's magma was about to rush into the sky and destroy everything. Damn thing, Aunt. I don't believe that you'll stay here forever. Just you wait. Lan Yu said angrily. He didn't leave, but found a place on Kongming Mountain as a temporary training ground to monitor Chu Mu. Kongming Mountain was where Chu Mu's cave dwelling was located. He had the right to expel Lan Yu, but if he appeared outside, Lan Yu would most likely attack him. This was one of Lan Yu's plans. If Chu Mu appeared, he would immediately capture Chu Mu and take away the deep blue sacred pearl. The deep blue sacred pearl could bring him benefits, so it was worth risking his life for. As the owner of Kongming Mountain, Chu Mu could monitor everything on Kongming Mountain to a certain extent. Therefore, he knew that Lan Yu was waiting somewhere on Kongming Mountain, waiting for him to appear. His intelligence is worrying. Chu Mu sighed softly with a look of pity on his face. Previously, Lan Yu kept tempting Chu Mu, but in Chu Mu's eyes, this method was quite low level. In the end, he even described the deep blue sacred pearl, thinking that Chu Mu didn't know what it was, trying to deceive him and take away the deep blue sacred pearl. A mere 1,000,000 upper-grade inner pills, haha. Did he really think that Chu Mu was a fool? Little did he know that he was the idiot, and that he was still staying on Kongming Mountain was another idiot's behavior. Taking out a token, Chu Mu contacted a high-level member of the Genius Small World, a high-stage sacred rank expert. As the only monstrous genius in the minor genius world, the upper echelons of the minor genius world valued him greatly. Because of Chu Mu, the reputation of the minor genius world had reached a new height. Therefore, many higher-ups of the genius small world gave their contact tokens to Chu Mu. As long as they were in the genius small world, Chu Mu could contact them at any time. Chu Mu activated the token and contacted a high-level saint. Chu Mu roughly explained that there was a mid-level saint from the imperial court who had snuck into the genius small world. He thought that Chu Mu had obtained the deep blue divine pearl and wanted to take it from him. After being rejected, he was waiting outside the hollow chime cave for Chu Mu to appear. The reason why Chu Mu directly told him about the deep blue divine pearl was because he had thought it over and over again before coming to a decision. If he hid it and that person from the imperial court thought that he couldn't obtain the deep blue divine pearl, it would be very disadvantageous for him. However, if he said it first and explained why the other party was looking for trouble with him, it would make people think that he didn't have the deep blue divine pearl and that the other party was looking for trouble on purpose. What was the deep blue divine pearl? It was a treasure that countless experts in the deep blue world coveted. Anyone who obtained one would want nothing more than to hide it. It was impossible for them to speak of it and let others know. However, Chumu said it very frankly. It meant that he didn't have the deep blue divine pearl, but the other party was using it as an excuse to cause trouble for him. Furthermore, it was very difficult for a spatial ring to isolate the deep blue divine pearl's aura. If there was a special sensing method, others would know. A treasure that countless experts couldn't obtain was easily obtained by someone at the 8th sky of Nirvana stage? As expected, the high-level saint that he contacted didn't suspect that Chumu really had the deep blue divine pearl at all. He also knew about the imperial court. Therefore, he directly believed that the deacon of the imperial court had set his eyes on Chumu and didn't have good intentions. What happened next was very simple. The high-level saint directly made his move and arrived at Kongming Mountain. You really have guts. You actually snuck into the genius small world and tried to kill the geniuses there. The high-level saint appeared before Lan Yu and said coldly. After all, the other party was from the imperial court. The imperial court was very mysterious and not easy to provoke. Otherwise, he would have killed Lan Yu directly. However, while he could avoid death, he couldn't escape punishment. The high-level saint directly attacked and heavily injured Lan Yu. Looking at his injuries, unless he had some extremely good healing pill, he wouldn't be able to recover in less than a year. After being heavily injured, Lan Yu's status in the genius small world was revoked and he was thrown out of the genius small world. The hatred in Lan Yu's heart couldn't be washed away. But so what? He wasn't dead. The imperial court couldn't become enemies with the genius small world because of him. Therefore, he could only rely on himself. At least for the next period of time, he wouldn't be able to find trouble with Chumu. He had to heal himself. After dealing with Lan Yu, Chumu heaved a sigh of relief and focused on cultivating. He also went to the 4th level of the Enlightenment Tower and the 3rd level of the Lesser Aeon Tower to cultivate. His strength was increasing bit by bit. 2 months later, Chumu accepted a mission that could only be completed by a low-level saint and left the genius small world. A month later, he completed the mission and returned. He received the reward and merit point. He rested for a few days to comprehend what he gained from the mission and continued to accept missions. In the blink of an eye, more than a year had passed. Back and forth, Chumu had completed many dangerous missions and obtained a huge amount of merit points. His cultivation had also reached the limit of 8th heavenly layer peak. It was time for him to break through 9th heavenly layer nirvana. However, Chumu planned to suppress it and not break through for now. He would wait until the ancient sacred city descended. It was said that he could obtain a lot of benefits there. During the mission, Chumu didn't stop cultivating. Even if he was rushing, he would split a portion of his attention to comprehend the sword technique. Therefore, after a year, the cloud-piercing sword style had been further perfected, and its power had increased. The god-slaying sword style was also very proficient, and he had grasped its essence. It could be said that Chumu had truly analyzed it and completely grasped it. In the Sever character art, other than the god-slaying sword style, Chumu had also completely grasped the void-slashing sword style. Just like the god-slaying sword style, he had also grasped the basics of the flow-slashing sword style. He was very familiar with it, but he hadn't grasped its essence yet. The 4 sword styles of the Sever character art all had their own strength. The god-slaying sword style focused on one's aura. Could even kill a god, so its aura had to be very strong. Another meaning was to target one's mind. Of course, the god-slaying sword style couldn't reach the level of killing one's mind, but it could use one's aura to attack the opponent's mind and cause them to lose their guard. Thus, to completely master the god-slaying sword style, one had to have a deep understanding of aura. The uniqueness of the Sky Slasher sword style was that it could slash the formless. It was empty, there was nothing. However, the Sky Slasher sword style was to slash the formless. This move also involved the power of space. Its power was extremely terrifying. The flow slashing sword style's flow was endless, soft, flexible, and tough. The flow slashing sword style was like slashing water. It relied on the application of sword intent and other forces to make it last longer. The flow slashing sword style looked like a simple slash, but in fact, it contained multiple changes of force and was very particular about the application of force. The extreme slashing sword style, in terms of pure lethality, the extreme slashing sword style was the most powerful. There was no need to pay attention to aura, formlessness, or the multiple transformations of power. There was only one key point, and that was power. Power, pure sharpness. It was indomitable, without the slightest hesitation. With a single slash of the sword, everything in the world would be cut apart. I finally got it. In Chu Mu's hand there was a sparkling purple arc of lightning that flowed in a circle, emitting a terrifying power. It was the essence of the heaven and earth lightning. After completing many missions, Chu Mu's status in the genius small world hadn't risen to the dark gold rank yet, but it was close. The merit points he obtained were also discounted by the gold rank, and he successfully exchanged for the thunder essence. On the way back to Kongming Mountain, suddenly an earth-shattering sound rang out, causing the entire small world to tremble. A scarlet light vaguely flashed in the sky above. It was just a flash, but it was a ghastly sight. Everyone in the genius small world was alarmed, and one by one, they appeared and looked up at the sky. Outside the small world of geniuses, an earth-shattering sound came from the ancient heavenly domain, causing the entire ancient heavenly domain to tremble. A terrifying scarlet thunderbolt pierced through the sky, tearing the sky apart like a huge piece of cloth. That scarlet lightning seemed to be a sword light. It was incomparably sharp, and its sharpness was astonishing to the extreme. In the sky above the ancient heaven domain, a 1,000-mile-long crack appeared. The edge of the crack was filled with jagged edges, like the slightly opened mouth of an incomparably huge shark. Traces of terrifying aura permeated the air, affecting the entire ancient heaven domain. Everyone felt as if they were being pressed down by an invisible mountain, adding a restriction, and their movements were not as smooth as usual. What's going on? Is this the end? Many people were terrified. The ancient sacred city is finally coming. Those who knew the inside story were excited. That 1,000-mile-long giant red crack was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye, like a mouth that was slowly opening. When this blood-red crack opened to a certain extent, the legendary ancient sacred city would descend, and fall somewhere in the ancient heaven domain. At that time, cultivators would be able to enter to search for opportunities. Chapter 1500. The crack in the sky has appeared. The ancient sacred city is about to descend. Everyone, get ready. Once the sacred city descends, enter immediately. Every force in the ancient domain was fully mobilized to prepare for the arrival of the ancient sacred city. The huge crack was thousands of miles long, almost crossing the entire sky of the ancient heaven domain. The neighboring domains of the ancient heaven domain could clearly see and feel the terrifying pressure. Even the distant domains could vaguely see the huge crack in the sky of the ancient heaven domain. Far away in the blue sea, although it was difficult to see the gigantic blood-colored fissure, the experts could feel a primordial aura that reached the heavens. It was ancient, deep, and like an abyss. Ancient sacred city. On the Sky Sword Mountain of the Sky Sword Island, the white-robed Sky Sword Saint Master stood with his hands behind his back, facing the direction of the ancient domain. His eyes were deep as if they could see through time and space. Bai Yun, Yu Chen, you too can go to the ancient domain and enter the ancient sacred city. Yes, Master. Mo Bai Yun and Yang Yuchen stood behind the Sky Sword Saint Master and answered respectfully. If you see Chu Mu in the ancient sacred city, please send my regards. The Sky Sword Saint Master smiled and said. "Don't worry, Master." Yang Yuqin smiled and said, "I wonder how strong Chu Mu is now. He is a monster. He is improving all the time." Mo Baiyun smiled and said, "Maybe we will be surprised when we see him in the ancient sacred city." On the islands in the Blue Sea, the experts of many sects and forces took their talented Nirvana realm disciples to the inland using their flying ship. In a short time, many flying ships appeared in the sky of the Blue Sea. They were of different types and colors with different symbols. They quickly left the island and headed towards the same destination. Suddenly, from the Blue Sea, a huge monster rushed out of the sea, bringing with it huge waves that were thousands of meters tall. It was a huge silver shark that was thousands of meters long. It emitted a cold aura, and its ferocious appearance made people shudder. This wasn't a real shark, but a flying ship. A flying ship that looked like a giant shark. It was the Shark Clan's flying ship, carrying the Shark Clan's Saint-level experts and genius high-level Shark Clan warriors. Other than the giant shark flying ship, there was also the giant whale flying ship, the bawang flying ship, the crab flying ship, and other sea tribe flying ship. Their goal was also to get to the ancient sacred city. Even though the interior was the territory of the human race, the descent of the ancient sacred city was a great opportunity that could not be missed. Even if it was dangerous, they had to go. They had to enter. Moreover, with so many members of the Sea Clan moving out together, to a certain extent, they had the ability to resist the inland humans. The majestic fleet of flying ships blotted out the sky, shocking everyone. It was as if they were about to attack the mainland. On the deep blue continent, in various domains outside the ancient heaven region, the experts also brought their Nirvana realm disciples to the ancient heaven region. This was a competition, a huge, direct, and cruel competition. The crack in the sky has appeared, the ancient sacred city is about to descend. I have to seize the time to improve my strength. Chu Mu, who was in the genius small world, felt a sense of urgency after learning about the situation. It was said that the last time the ancient sacred city appeared was 3,000 years ago. At that time, many Nirvana realm and eternal ancient realm experts entered. Many died, but many experts came out. This time, it wouldn't be any worse than the last time. There would definitely be many people entering. Nirvana realm was only a part of it, while eternal ancient realm was another part. The competition would be extremely fierce. After all, Nirvana realm experts couldn't compete with eternal ancient realm experts. Even a monster like Chu Mu couldn't compete with a middle-stage Saint rank expert. Moreover, there would be high-stage Saint rank experts in eternal ancient realm. Chu Mu was very clear that even if he increased his strength by 10 times or 100 times, he still wouldn't be able to fight against middle-stage high-stage sacred rank experts. However, no matter what, his opponents weren't just middle-stage high-stage sacred rank experts. In fact, under normal circumstances, they wouldn't even want to fight against him. The stronger he was, the better. Perhaps the dangers in the ancient sacred city weren't just his competitors, but other dangers. The appearance of the crack in the sky meant that the ancient sacred city was about to descend. However, there was still a period of time before it truly descended. This period of time was just enough for everyone to improve their strength and make more preparations. What a terrifying pressure! My flying speed has decreased by at least half. The experts who came from the outer region to enter the ancient domain had a drastic change in their expressions. The moment they entered the ancient domain, they felt an invisible pressure fall on their bodies. It was as if an invisible mountain was pressing down on them, and as if an invisible rope was binding them. This kind of pressure was more obvious for those with higher cultivation and less for those with lower cultivation. Overall, the ratio was the same. Under the pressure, everyone's flying speed had decreased by half. For a moment, the ancient domain was almost overcrowded. At least under the current circumstances, no one knew where the ancient sacred city would descend. The experts from the outer region had arrived, and they started to occupy a place as a temporary base. After a period of time, the experts from the human race and the sea race had also arrived. On the blue sea, the sea race was like a tyrant. They were used to being overbearing. Even if they had restrained themselves after entering the inner region, they would not lower their heads. They were still as arrogant as before. With so many people coming, there were only so many places. Everyone wanted to occupy a better environment, so conflicts were inevitable. The ancient domain had already fallen into chaos before the ancient sacred city had even descended. Get lost. If you don't get lost, I'll kill you. This is the territory of our Sever sect. You're the ones who should get lost. Sea race, get lost back to the blue sea. This is the inner region. It's not a place for you sea race to come. Human race, is there anywhere in the deep blue world that we sea race can't go? The inner region is not a place for you sea race to behave atrociously. Get lost, or you'll be killed without mercy. Let's see who's going to kill who. Energy chi was rampant, and terrifying energy wreaked havoc in all directions. A fierce battle unfolded. The battle between the sea race and the human race was completely merciless. There were many sea race that came here. Although there was internal competition and even extermination, they were quite united against the outside world. In this battle, a mountain in the ancient domain was directly shattered. A large number of sea race and human race died. The ancient sacred city had yet to descend, but there was already such chaos. If this continued, the entire ancient domain would be affected, and it would be completely chaotic. As the master of the ancient domain, at least that was what they thought. The people of the 4 heavenly gates had appeared. The appearance of the 4 heavenly gates high-level saint experts warned the human race and the sea race that if there were any conflicts, they could either leave the outer region of the ancient domain and fight however they wanted, or wait until the ancient sacred city descended and enter the ancient sacred city to settle it. Otherwise, the 4 heavenly gates would take action and kill all those who dared to cause chaos in the ancient domain. Immediately after, the first-rate, quasi-first-rate, and second-rate forces in the ancient domain also issued statements to support the decision of the 4 heavenly gate. For a time, the various forces in the ancient domain gathered together and united against the outside world. Under the pressure, the human race fell silent. Although the sea race was rampant and overbearing, this was not the blue sea, but the inland. It was a place far from the blue sea. They couldn't fight against the many forces in the ancient domain, and they couldn't send reinforcements in time. The chaos calmed down, but small-scale conflicts were still unavoidable. The 4 heavenly gates didn't care about this, as long as it wasn't a big conflict that caused chaos. In the temporary territory of the Shark Clan, there was a handsome Shark Clan member. It was the young master of the Emperor Shark Clan, Emperor Shark Jade. In Emperor Shark Jade's hand was a long sword covered with barbs. It was very ferocious and ferocious. In an instant, he had slashed out hundreds of times. Hundreds of terrifying sword light shattered the void in front of him, and a dozen level 9 high-rank Shark Clan warriors were sent flying. The dozen level 9 high-rank Shark Clan warriors were all elites of the Emperor Shark Clan. Their fighting strength was very shocking, but they were still sent flying by Emperor Shark Jade in a single move. It was enough to show Emperor Shark Jade's tyrannical strength. "Young master, your strength has improved a lot," an old Shark Clan member who was dressed like a steward said with a smile. "I heard that the Nirvana Realm human who killed over 10,000 of my Shark Clan's warriors has unparalleled talent. This time, he should also enter the ancient sacred city. At that time, I will personally kill him and use his head as a sacrifice to the warriors of my Shark Clan." Emperor Shark Jade said in an indifferent voice. "With young master's current strength, it won't be difficult for you to kill that person." The steward echoed. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, almost 2 months had passed since the crack in the sky appeared. The crack in the sky was constantly expanding. At that moment, it had already expanded to an astonishing extent. The crack in the sky above the ancient heaven domain didn't change. It was still a few thousand li long. However, the width of the crack had increased from a few dozen meters to a few thousand li long. It looked like a gigantic mouth. As the crack in the sky expanded, the pressure it emitted became more and more obvious. The pressure on the crowd was also gradually increasing. Finally, the crack in the sky stopped expanding. Countless lightning bolts shuttled back and forth. It was extremely terrifying and filled with destructive energy. Even a peerless cultivator wouldn't be able to survive in it. As time passed, a shadow appeared within the rift, which grew larger and larger until, shockingly, it looked like a city. It's the ancient sacred city. The ancient sacred city has finally arrived. Countless people were cheering. They had been waiting for this moment. Even though it had only been 2 months, it felt like 20 or even 200 years had passed. The city flew out of the crack in the sky and rapidly expanded. In the end, with a loud explosion, the ground of the ancient heaven domain violently shook. Countless clouds of dust rose like waves. Chapter 1501. In the sky above ancient heaven region, the huge bloody crack that looked like the mouth of an ancient ferocious beast was still open. It was emitting a terrifying aura, and the terrifying pressure was still there. The crack in the sky would continue until the ancient sacred city left this world. The earth of the ancient heaven domain shook, and even the neighboring domains were affected, shaking unceasingly. Dust that was dozens of meters high was like a huge wave that was endless. Wave after wave, it rushed in all directions. It meant that the ancient sacred city had truly descended on ancient heaven region. Let's go. The ancient sacred city has descended. Let's go immediately. While the tremors were still going on, countless experts had already moved and rushed towards the place where the ancient sacred city would descend. They planned to enter the ancient sacred city before others. Perhaps, if they entered earlier, they would have a chance to obtain the treasure before others. Fools! The seal on the ancient sacred city will last for a while before it disappears. Only then can we enter. Some of the experts from the 4 heavenly gates were disdainful of those who were fighting to be the first to enter the ancient sacred city. If one were to look through the historical records, they would know that every time the ancient sacred city descended, there would be a period of protection. During this period, no one, not even a sacred emperor, could break through the protective seal and enter the ancient sacred city. They could only wait for the protective power to disappear. Hence, there was not much difference in arriving at the ancient sacred city earlier or later. They still had to wait. Even so, the people of the 4 heavenly gates did not delay. After they were ready, they still had to set off. The people of the sea race headed towards the place where the ancient sacred city would descend. Countless human tribe experts flew across the sky in an endless stream, blotting out the sun like a swarm of locusts. They only had one target, the ancient sacred city. In the genius small world, Chumu had also set off. He had already made his preparations. For example, elixirs that he had obtained from the experts that he had killed. There was no need for him to prepare anything. With the descent of the ancient sacred city, almost all the geniuses in the genius small world were going to enter. The ancient sacred city was an opportunity, a huge opportunity. As long as they wanted to continue on and become stronger, they would not miss it. This was a feast that no one could refuse. This time, Chumu wasn't acting alone. Instead, he was traveling with the high-level Saint Realm experts of the genius small world. As the only demonic genius in the genius small world, he was extremely precious. Perhaps they might not be able to protect Chumu in the ancient sacred city, but they would try their best to protect Chumu on the way to the ancient sacred city. One had to know that there were many people heading to the ancient sacred city this time. Saint-level experts were as numerous as carps crossing the river, densely packed together. No matter how strong Chumu was, there were still many experts who could kill him. If a high-level sage wanted to protect Chumu, Chu-Mu wouldn't refuse. His focus would be on the inside of the ancient sacred city, not outside. Swordsmen were all about pressing forward with indomitable will, cutting through thorns, and challenging all difficulties with great courage. However, great courage alone was not enough, great wisdom was also required. The Luo Feng Mountain was a 3,000 zhang tall mountain in the ancient domain. It was said that the Saint Beast Phoenix had lived on this mountain a long time ago. However, no one knew whether the Saint Beast Phoenix had lived there or not. After all, many years had passed and it was only a legend. It wasn't important whether the Saint Beast Phoenix had lived on the Luo Feng Mountain before. This was a barren mountain with thin heaven and earth yuan qi and scarce resources. It wasn't suitable for cultivation. Therefore, there weren't any sects or organizations on the Luo Feng Mountain. There weren't any towns or cities at the foot of the mountain either. Usually, there wouldn't be many people visiting this place. However, countless people were flying over from afar this time. This was the first time the Luo Feng Mountain had ever received so many guests. How magnificent! Is that the ancient sacred city? The cultivators who had rushed over from afar had no choice but to land on the ground due to the great pressure. They raised their heads and looked up at the peak of the Luo Feng Mountain. They were all amazed. There was a huge city standing on the peak of the Luo Feng Mountain. It was stable as if it was supported by a mysterious force. The city occupied a few dozen li in the sky. It was dark and gloomy as it floated above everyone's heads. It gave off a great pressure and made it difficult to breathe. Isn't it said that the ancient sacred city is incomparably huge and boundless? Why is it only a few dozen li in size? If all of us enter it, I'm afraid we won't even be able to find a place to stand. How can we get any opportunities? Someone said after exclaiming, "Shallow." Someone sneered and said disdainfully, "Who are you calling shallow? Explain it clearly." A conflict was about to break out. The ancient sacred city looks like a few dozen li in size from the outside. However, once you enter it, it's like a whole new world. It's incomparably vast. On the other side, someone seemed to have studied the ancient sacred city before and said slowly. As soon as these words were spoken, many people revealed expressions of sudden realization. Sumeru in a mustard seed, this was a method, an incomparably profound application of the Tao of space. From the outside, a city that was only a few dozen li in size could actually be thousands of li, tens of thousands of li, or even larger. Not to mention this group of people, even if there were 10 times or 100 times more people entering, they would only occupy a small portion of the ancient sacred city. Not long after, Chu-Mu and the others arrived at the foot of the Luo Feng Mountain. As soon as they arrived, they immediately felt a huge pressure pressing down from the sky. It landed on everyone's body, making it impossible for them to stay high in the sky. They could only land on the ground. As soon as they landed on the ground, the terrifying pressure disappeared. At a glance, there were countless figures and countless auras that intertwined and mixed together. It was extremely complicated. Raising his head, Chu-Mu stared at the city in the sky. Outside the city, there was a layer of blood-red light. Streams of blood-red light flowed like water, creating layers of blood-red ripples. It looked extremely magnificent. More and more people rushed here. Human clan, Sea clan, and other races such as Tian clan and so on. The Tian clan was extremely arrogant. Handsome men and beautiful women arrived one after another. Their bodies emitted a pure and holy aura, which was extremely eye-catching. The group of Tian clan people in the lead all had obscure auras and were unfathomable. They were all extremely terrifying Tian clan expert. The moment the Tian clan appeared, many people revealed expressions of fear. Even the arrogant and overbearing Sea clan people flashed a look of fear, unwilling to take the initiative to provoke the Tian clan. In the deep blue world, there were not many Tian clan people, but they were publicly recognized as powerful. Any Tian clan person had the tyrannical strength to challenge other races. The geniuses of the Tian clan were even more powerful, and the monstrous geniuses of the Tian clan were even more terrifying. The cultivation system of the Tian clan was different from the cultivation system of the human clan. The Nirvana realm of the human clan was called the Thousand-Era realm of the Tian clan, and the eternal realm of the human clan was called the immortal realm of the Tian clan. Other than the different names, there was also a clear difference in cultivation method. The Tian clan could not cultivate the cultivation methods of the human clan, and the human clan could not cultivate the cultivation methods of the Tian clan. According to this situation, the eternal sacred city was not suitable for the Tian clan to enter. In reality, the treasures that the Tian clan needed to cultivate were the same as the human clan. In terms of comprehension of heaven and earth, they were no different from the human clan. When the Tian clan people arrived, they occupied a corner. There was no one else around. More and more people arrived. The foot of the fallen Phoenix Mountain was completely occupied. Time passed. In a flash, everyone had already waited here for several days. Suddenly, the blood-red lights above the ancient sacred city became dimmer and dimmer. Then they disappeared. That meant that they could enter the ancient sacred city now. Many people were excited, but in that place, even high-level saints couldn't fly. How could they enter the ancient sacred city from a height of 3,000 zhang? Just as many people did not know what to do and were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, a strange sound rang out from within the eternal sacred city. Next, from within the eternal sacred city, rays of light shot out. Those rays of light were blood-red and were extremely fast. In an instant, they shot out of the eternal sacred city and towards the surrounding ground. Boom! 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 Loud sounds rang out. The ground trembled continuously and only calmed down after a dozen breaths. From the eternal sacred city, blood-red chains shot out. One end of the chains connected the eternal sacred city to the surrounding ground. Each blood-red chain was close to a meter wide and emitted a terrifying aura. Each chain was stretched taut and filled with terrifying might. From the bottom to the top, they were all connected to the eternal sacred city. There were a total of 100 blood-red chains in all directions. "That's the path to the saint level," shouted someone. The road to the saint level referred to the road to the saint level. It was a road that only the saint-level experts could easily traverse. As the name implied, the chances of an ordinary Nirvana realm expert crossing the blood-red chain were relatively low. However, if they could cross it and enter the ancient sacred city, they would have a great chance of becoming a saint-level expert of the eternal realm. As for those who were already saints, they could climb the chains and enter the eternal sacred city more easily. The path to the saint level has appeared. It's time to enter the eternal sacred city. Let's go. Immediately, many cultivators moved and rushed towards the blood-red chains closest to them. There were only 100 blood-red chains. It seemed like a lot, but it was actually very little. That was because there were millions of cultivators from various races gathered here. Just imagine what it would be like if millions of people were to enter the ancient sacred city through 100 blood-red chains. It would be an exaggeration to call it an army of thousands of men crossing a single log bridge. Naturally, competition and killing began to appear. Chapter 1502. 100 blood-colored chains pierced through the ground, connecting to the ancient sacred city in the sky. It was a shocking sight. Countless figures burst with power and leaped into the air, landing on the blood-red chains. That was the path of the Saint Plain. Their feet moved like wheels rolling at high speed. Their speed was incredible as they ran on the blood-red chains, heading for the holy city in the sky. Scram! With a flash of light and a surge of energy, someone was sent flying and fell down. "Bastard, you actually dare to attack me!" After landing, he wasn't injured. Instead, he looked up at the sky and stared at the person who attacked him. His face was ferocious and his anger surged. He waved his hands and 2 dragons of light soared into the sky, attacking. A similar scene played out on every blood-colored chain. They were fighting for the chance to enter the ancient sacred city first. It was as if as long as they entered first, they would be able to obtain a great opportunity. The people of the celestial race moved, directly charging towards one of the blood-colored chains. The moment they attacked, a terrifying heavenly technique erupted with shocking might, directly blasting everything in front of them away, fully displaying the might of the celestial race. That blood-colored chain was directly occupied by the celestials. No one dared to fight for it. The oceanic race was also very arrogant and domineering. They even wanted to occupy 3 blood-colored chains and sweep through everything. In the end, they clashed with the humans and the other races and fought endlessly. Those who participated in the battle were basically saints. Once a Nirvana realm expert entered, it was very likely that they would be drowned by all kinds of energy and die without a corpse. On the side of the small world of geniuses, Chumu didn't move. Instead, he stared at the battle on the blood-colored chains. Although he wanted to enter the ancient sacred city first, his current strength wasn't enough to participate in the fight. Stupid! Standing beside Chumu was a high-level saint from the small world of geniuses. He sneered as he watched the battle on the blood-colored chains. Chumu glanced at him in astonishment. As though sensing Chumu's puzzlement, the high-level saint explained, "Entering the ancient sacred city first is indeed possible. However, things aren't so simple. There are terrifying existences in the ancient sacred city." Chumu understood. Within the myriad ancient sacred city, other than opportunities, there were other things. For example, there were some strange life forms that were not to be trifled with. Chumu, after entering the eternal sacred city, remember to be careful. The high-level saint said solemnly, "I once studied the ancient sacred city and know that there is a strange life form called the tormented soul. It is a unique life form formed from the accumulated baleful chi in the ancient sacred city that has undergone a special mutation and fused with the remnant soul fragments. Tormented souls are extremely aggressive. It is said that they are especially sensitive to vitality and love to absorb vitality to strengthen themselves. According to ranks, tormented souls can be divided into small tormented souls, great tormented souls, tormented soul generals, and tormented soul kings. They correspond to the Nirvana realm, low-level saint, mid-level saint, and high-level saint. I think that those who enter the ancient sacred city first will emit fluctuations of vitality that will attract the hidden tormented souls. They will become the targets of the tormented souls." Chumu nodded. If this was true, those who entered first would realize that they had done something stupid. Of course, nothing was absolute. Opportunities were often accompanied by danger. It was normal to encounter danger if one wanted to obtain benefits. Time flew. Finally, someone took the first step and entered the ancient sacred city through the blood-colored chains. The competition was still very intense. Gradually, it evolved from the competition to a life-and-death battle. Blood splattered everywhere and severed limbs fell from the sky. It was extremely bloody. There were fewer and fewer people below, and more people entered the ancient sacred city. "Let's go. We will go up too," the high-level saint beside Chumu said. "All right." Chumu didn't refuse. Most of the people had already entered thousand ancient sacred city. The remaining small portion were still many sacred rank experts. Traveling with a high-stage sacred rank would provide a greater guarantee of safety. Chumu was not a pedantic person. He had courage and the corresponding wisdom. In the sword Tao, those who had achieved a certain level of success would rather break their sword than bend. This understanding could be said to be a kind of understanding when one truly stepped into the sword Tao. It was the initial understanding, and Chumu had already passed this stage. A sword could be bent, but it could not be profaned. A bent sword would explode with even more terrifying power. With a leap, he ran quickly on the blood-colored chains. Almost all the high-level saint experts had entered the ancient sacred city. Most of the mid-level saint experts had also entered the ancient sacred city. The remaining ones were a small number of mid-level saint experts, a large number of low-level saint experts, and Nirvana realm experts. Chumu was not afraid of the low-level saint experts and Nirvana realm expert. He was only wary of the few mid-level saint experts. The Luofeng mountain was 30,000 feet tall. The ancient sacred city was located at the peak of the Luofeng mountain. It was at least 30,000 feet above the ground. The blood-colored chains slanted diagonally to the ground and were close to 10,000 feet long. Chumu realized that the higher he went up the blood-colored chains, the more obvious the invisible pressure he had to endure. With the high-level saint expert from the genius small world leading the way, Chumu's path was unobstructed. Finally, he leaped a few meters into the air, drew an arc in the air, and landed on the ground. Chumu took in the scenery in front of him. Dilapidated palaces, crumbled walls, and cracked pillars. Everything gave Chumu a shocking feeling. The ruins, the mottled palaces, the moss on the collapsed walls, and the spider webs in the cracks of the pillars. All of them showed the traces of time. The ruins also seemed to show everyone that a great battle had happened here. Perhaps it was not just one battle, but many shocking battles. Chumu, enter the ancient sacred city. You will have to rely on yourself for all the opportunities. Survive. I hope to see you again outside the ancient sacred city. The high-level saint expert said to Chumu. Opportunities might be everywhere in the ancient sacred city, but they had to be found by themselves. Whether it was suitable or not, everyone had their own path and their own opportunities. Opportunities that were suitable for Nirvana realm experts might not be suitable for high-level saint expert. Opportunities that were suitable for high-level saint experts, regardless of whether they were suitable or not, would not be given to Nirvana realm experts. Opportunities were self-sufficient. Even if they were blood brothers, they could turn against each other because of an opportunity. See you outside the ancient sacred city. Chumu saluted with his sword and said. The high-level saint-level powerhouse nodded and quickly flew forward. Once they entered the ancient sacred city, all the battles stopped. Everyone chose a direction and left quickly. They wanted to enter the depths of the ancient sacred city to seek opportunities. After entering the ancient sacred city, Chumu was not in a hurry. The aura of the ancient sacred city was endless, as if it had existed since ancient times. After entering, he had a strange feeling. He was clearly restrained, but at the same time, he felt carefree like a fish in water. It was very contradictory. After carefully sensing it, he could not say why. On the ground not far ahead, there were more than 10 corpses. They looked like corpses that had been left behind for a long time. Their vitality had been sucked dry, leaving behind withered corpses. But from the clothes on their bodies, it could be seen that they were people who had entered the ancient sacred city before. Among those people, there were high-level saint experts and mid-level saint experts. Now that there were more than 10 dried corpses, one could not help but feel a chill. Indeed, as the high-level saint expert had said, it was not a good thing to be the first to enter the ancient sacred city. Tormented soul. Muttering to himself, Chumu couldn't help but feel vigilant. Even these middle-stage saint-rank experts had been sucked into dried corpses. Right now, he was no match for a middle-stage saint-rank expert, let alone a high-stage one. Taking a deep breath, although he was vigilant, he did not feel afraid. Holding the sky beheading sword in his left hand, Chumu took a step forward and began to move forward. The spatial rings of the corpses were gone. He did not know if they were taken away by the tormented soul or by someone else. Passing by the corpses, Chumu's divine sense spread out. Because of the invisible pressure in the ancient sacred city, those who entered, regardless of whether they were in the Nirvana realm or the Eternal realm, could not fly. They could only travel on their feet. Even their divine sense was suppressed. Chumu's enormous divine sense could only be released to a range of 10 meters. Beyond that, it became very difficult. Chumu was surprised that he could not maintain it for long. His divine sense was suppressed too much. Chu Mu decided to withdraw his divine sense and raised his sixth sense to the maximum. His sixth sense was very sharp. Besides being born with it, it was also because he had cultivated the fifth level of swordsmanship. Therefore, at this moment, the range of his sixth sense was better than his divine sense. It was more practical. The speed of his footsteps became faster and faster. Gradually, as he ran, his feet left afterimages. Chu Mu didn't know much about 10,000 ancient sacred city. In fact, he knew very little. He didn't know where the opportunities were in 10,000 ancient sacred city. Perhaps it was luck, perhaps it was hard work, or perhaps it was a combination of both. But no matter what, if one stayed in a place and did not move forward, the opportunities would not find themselves. Everyone had entered the ancient sacred city. Tens of millions of people had entered, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Chu Mu had already walked for 15 minutes. With his speed, he had already advanced dozens of miles. Other than the corpses at the beginning, he did not see anyone else. He did not encounter any tormented spirits, let alone any opportunities. After all, it was just a saying that there were opportunities everywhere. The deeper he went into the ancient sacred city, the more he felt the vicissitudes of life. The traces of time became more mottled. Dilapidated palaces, pavilions, collapsed walls, and giant pillars were everywhere. Looking forward, there was no end to it. Traces of blood filled the sky like a mirage. With the high intensity of his sixth sense, everything around him was very clear to Chu Mu. Suddenly, Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. His expression was cold and solemn. His sharp senses told him that he had been targeted and had become a target. Chapter 1503. Under the sword, the last trace of blood dissipated. Chu Mu reached out and grabbed, and a blood-red crystal fell into his hand. It exuded a cold and gloomy aura, which went into his palm and along his arm. In an instant it spread all over his body. His blood felt as if it was about to freeze and rush to the spiritual world. In front of his eyes, a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood seemed to flash. The eternal sword will trembled, suppressing everything and keeping all evil away. The mountain of corpses and the sea of blood that was condensing was cut into pieces by a sword light and disappeared without a trace. What a powerful illusion! Chu Mu's tone was a little surprised. He looked at the blood-red crystal in his hand, which was still cold and gloomy. Just now, it was this thing in his hand that almost made him fall into the illusion of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. This blood-red crystal was about the size of a pigeon's egg. It was the essence left behind by a tormented soul that Chu Mu had just killed. That tormented soul looked like a human with only the upper body. Its whole body was condensed by blood-red evil chi. It looked a little illusory and was very ferocious. It drilled out from the ground and took the initiative to attack Chu Mu. In the end, it died under Chu Mu's sword. The eternal sword will was invulnerable to all evil. The influence of the tormented soul's evil chi on Chu Mu was greatly reduced. This little tormented soul could not withstand Chu Mu's sword at all. If it were not for the fact that Chu Mu kept dodging in order to familiarize himself with it and study it, he would have killed it with one strike and obtained this thing in his hand. This was a piece of tormented soul crystal, which was equivalent to a piece of 1,000-year-old evil chi crystal. If it were in the past, Chu Mu would definitely be very excited, because the 1,000-year-old evil chi crystal could be used to feed the undying sword and upgrade it. But now, the undying sword had been upgraded to the level of a heavenly saint sword. If it went up, it would be a spiritual sword, which required more negative energy. However, the 1,000-year-old baleful chi crystal could be used to temper the mind and temper the will. However, now was not the right time to do so, so he put it away first. Other than Chu Mu, for the others who entered the ancient sacred city, some had died under the attacks of the tormented spirits, their vitality sucked dry. There were also some who had successfully killed the tormented spirits and obtained the tormented spirit crystals. This could be considered the first type of harvest after entering the ancient sacred city. Chu Mu didn't know how big the myriad ancient sacred city was. He only knew that he had already been here for half a day. He kept moving forward, but he still couldn't see the end. It was as though this place was a vast world. With the word city in its name, it should be a city. However, other than the city walls, palaces, pavilions, and huge pillars, there were also strange-looking trees. These trees had all turned a faint blood-red color, as if they were demons baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Some tormented souls were hiding in these strange trees. Chu Mu entered a half-collapsed pavilion. The pavilion was covered in dust. Chu Mu's eyes shone brightly as he swept his gaze across the place. The power of his divine sense also spread out. Although the power of his divine sense was greatly suppressed here, and wasn't as useful as the 5th level of swordsmanship in sensing danger, the power of his divine sense still had its advantages. For example, the power of his divine sense was better than the 5th level of swordsmanship in searching for things. With a wave of his hand, a few rays of sword light pierced through the air and cleaved the dust in a few places. They didn't damage the things covered by the dust in the slightest. After the dust was cleared, a few jade bottles were revealed. Chu Mu stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. These jade bottles might have been good jade in the past, but it was a pity that they had lost their spiritual chi and luster. They had become dull. When he opened the stopper, a rotten smell wafted out. Even if there was something inside, it would have turned into nothingness after countless years of erosion. After casually throwing away the jade bottles that had lost their luster, Chu Mu left the half-collapsed pavilion. As soon as he walked out of the pavilion, Chu Mu had a feeling that he was being watched again. It was a cold and gloomy feeling. It was another tormented soul that was watching him. This feeling was stronger than the previous few times. It was obvious that it wasn't a small tormented soul that was watching him. The cold and gloomy feeling affected the blood flow in Chu Mu's body. The divine wilderness sword essence was activated and the power of his physique spread out. Immediately, the evil spirit that was attacking him was forced out of his body. The eternal sword essence guarded his spiritual world, and no evil spirit could invade it. The power of the tormented soul lay in its incomparably strong evil spirit. It could easily slow down one's blood flow and paralyze one's nerves, causing one's body to be unable to keep up with the rhythm and become sluggish. It could also affect one's mind, causing one to fall into illusions and be unable to concentrate. If a cultivator's body became sluggish and his mind was unable to concentrate, no matter how strong he was, his power would be greatly reduced. He would only be able to exert 70% or even 50% of his power. These were nothing to Chu Mu. The tormented soul appeared. Judging from its aura, it should be a great tormented soul. It looked like a centipede and was blood-red all over. It was more than 5 meters long and looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. A great tormented soul was equivalent to a low-level martial saint expert. The low-level martial saints were divided into 1, 2, 3, and 3 levels. The blood centipede's aura was equivalent to a 2-star martial saint. However, because of its evil spirit, it was more powerful than an ordinary 2-star martial saint. It was enough to contend against an ordinary 3-star martial saint. However, its evil spirit was ineffective against Chu Mu, so it could only be counted as a 2-star martial saint. The blood centipede bared its fangs and brandished its claws. Its many legs moved quickly on the ground at a terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a blood-red shadow and shot towards Chu Mu from behind a half-collapsed wall. The sharp sound of the wind breaking almost pierced Chu Mu's eardrums. Chu Mu's expression remained unchanged and cold. His eyes locked onto the blood centipede's figure. He had already unsheathed the heaven-slash sword. Holding it in his hand, he slowly took a stance. The clouds were faintly discernible. They were dyed a light red by the evil spirit that was everywhere in the ancient sacred city. When he drew his sword, the sword light was extremely condensed and sharp. It silently tore through the sky like lightning and pierced through thousands of clouds. The blood centipede was extremely fast, but it did not have much intelligence. It could not dodge in time and was instantly pierced through by the sword. Its body trembled. If it was a 2-star martial saint, Chu Mu's cloud-piercing sword style would have been enough to kill it. However, the blood centipede was not a living creature. It was just a strange existence formed by the soul fragments that had gathered the evil spirit of the ancient sacred city for countless years. It was something similar to a spiritual body. Chu Mu's eternal sword intent guarded the spiritual world and could not be invaded by any evil spirit. However, in terms of direct destructive power, it was somewhat weak. Of course, this was relative. If it was compared to the eternal sword intent, it would be much stronger. The blood centipede was pierced through by the cloud-piercing sword style. Although it did not collapse immediately, it was still heavily injured. The sword intent and true meaning in the cloud-piercing sword style, as well as the power of the heavens and the earth, all caused damage to the blood centipede. However, a strange spiritual body like a tormented soul seemed to have an obvious resistance to power. Perhaps only a certain power could cause such destructive damage to them. Since it was not killed by the sword, the blood centipede continued to charge towards Chu Mu. The terrifying and sharp sound wave was like a sword, spreading out layers of ripples in the air. It was like a continuous smoke ring, rushing towards Chu Mu. Without dodging, Yi Futian stabbed out with his sword. The power condensed into a point and starlight appeared. The sword shattered the starlight. Under the sword, the sound wave was shattered. The body of the blood centipede was pierced by the starlight. The starlight exploded, and a terrifying power spread out, tearing the blood centipede's body apart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chu Mu took the opportunity to shoot out more than 10 sword light, which intertwined into a net of sword light. Each sword light was controlled by the eternal sword intent, and it was extremely terrifying. It cut the blood centipede into pieces. At last, Yi Futian added another strike. The power of this strike was very direct and strong. It was like a storm. Only then was the blood centipede killed. In terms of power, excluding the influence of the murderous aura, the blood centipede was equivalent to a 2-star martial saint. However, in terms of survivability, it was far superior to a 2-star martial saint. In comparison, if a 2-star martial saint was hit by Chu Mu's sword, even if they did not die, they would be severely injured. The second strike would definitely kill them. As for this blood centipede, it took Chu Mu more than 10 strikes to kill it. Although the process was a little difficult, the harvest was not bad. When Chu Mu held a murderous aura crystal in his hand, the cold energy invaded his body, and his blood almost froze. Fortunately, he was prepared. He circulated his power, and his blood boiled. Only then was he able to withstand it. His mind was also attacked by the murderous aura. This time, the murderous aura was more than 10 times stronger than the previous one. A mountain of corpses and a sea of blood floated. Chu Mu felt a chill all over his body. It was a chill that he felt in his mind, and his hair stood on end. It was as if he had become a dismembered corpse in a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. At the crucial moment, the eternal sword intent worked again. A sword descended from the sky, and the sword light was dazzling. It tore through the sky and illuminated the Styx River. Under the sword, the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood were split apart. The illusion disappeared, and Chu Mu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. What a terrifying illusion! Chu Mu thought. If this illusion was 30% stronger, the eternal sword intent would not be able to do anything. After all, Chu Mu was only in the Nirvana realm. Although the eternal sword intent was high-end, it had not truly matured. However, this illusion belonged to a low-level martial saint. If it was a mid-level martial saint, Chu Mu would have sunk into the illusion of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Although it was dangerous, Chu Mu found that his mind and will had been tempered once again. It seemed to have improved, but it was not very obvious. However, if he did it a few more times, there would be a more significant improvement. The blood-red crystal in his hand was larger than the ones he had obtained before. Its color was deeper, and the cold energy it emitted was more intense. It could be said that this was equivalent to a 10,000-year-old baleful chi crystal. It could already be used to refine the undying sword and raise its level. However, the eternal sword was currently at the level of a heavenly saint's sword. If it was upgraded, it would become a spiritual sword. It was like upgrading from the nirvana realm to the eternal realm. It was a qualitative leap. This evil spirit crystal alone was not enough to upgrade the eternal sword. Chu Mu planned to keep it. After he obtained a few more evil spirit crystals, he would upgrade the eternal sword to a spiritual sword in one fell swoop. A spiritual sword was stronger than a heavenly saint's sword. The evil spirit crystal was actually a kind of opportunity.